Hey everyone, I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know a lot of you use this video to fall asleep, so before we start, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you from, and what time is it there? Now get comfortable, take a deep breath, and just relax. The perfect match. In this digital age where our lives are intertwined with social media, I never imagined that something as innocent as scrolling through my phone could lead to the most terrifying night of my life. Like millions of others, I used social media daily, sharing glimpses of my life with friends and strangers alike, never truly considering the darker implications of putting myself out there for the world to see. My name is Marcus, and at the time this happened, I was 23 years old, living in a small town about 40 miles outside of the city. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where the local diner still serves coffee for $1, and where nothing particularly exciting ever happens. I had around 300 connections on my social media accounts, which in our little community actually made me somewhat popular, though compared to influencers with their millions of followers, I was nobody special. It was a Thursday evening in late October when everything started. The autumn chill had just begun to settle over our town, and I was lounging on my couch, mindlessly watching a documentary about serial killers. Ironically enough, my phone buzzed with a notification, that familiar dopamine-triggering sound that we've all become addicted to. A new follower on my photo-sharing app. The username read, Haley Morrison, and when I clicked on the profile, I felt my heart skip a beat. She was absolutely stunning. The kind of beautiful that makes you do a double take, wondering if the photos could possibly be real. Blonde hair that cascaded down her shoulders like golden silk, eyes the color of the ocean on a clear summer day, and a smile that could light up the darkest room. Her profile showed she had over 5,000 followers, and her feed was filled with carefully curated images that told the story of what seemed to be a perfect life. Beach vacations, fancy restaurants, hiking adventures in mountains I could only dream of visiting. Now, I've been on social media long enough to know that attractive women with thousands of followers don't just randomly follow guys from small towns. My first instinct was skepticism. This had to be a bot account, or worse, someone trying to scam me. So I did what any reasonable person would do, and began investigating her profile more thoroughly. Her posts were spread out realistically over the past 3 years. The first photo was from a college graduation, complete with tagged friends congratulating her in the comments. As I scrolled through, I noticed the natural progression of her life, new jobs, different hairstyles over time, seasonal changes in her wardrobe. Each photo had hundreds of likes and dozens of comments, many from what appeared to be real people with their own established profiles. The engagement seemed genuine, with inside jokes in the comments, references to shared memories, and the kind of natural interaction you can't fake. I was still browsing through her vacation photos from what looked like Costa Rica when another notification popped up. A direct message from her. My hands actually trembled slightly as I opened it, which seems ridiculous now, but at the time, the excitement was overwhelming. Hey there, her message read. I know this is really random, and I honestly never do this, but I came across your profile and thought you were incredibly attractive. Your hiking photos are amazing. That sunset shot from Mount Harrison is breathtaking. I'm actually planning a hiking trip next month, and would love to hear about some good trails in your area. The message felt personal, specific. She had actually looked at my photos, referenced a particular one. This wasn't some generic copy-paste message that scammers usually send. I spent probably 15 minutes crafting my response, deleting and rewriting it multiple times before finally settling on something that I hoped sounded casual but interested. Hey Haley, thanks for reaching out. I'm always happy to talk about hiking. Mount Harrison is definitely worth the climb, especially if you catch it at golden hour. There are actually several great trails around here that most tourists don't know about. What kind of difficulty level are you looking for? Her response came quickly, and before I knew it, we were deep in conversation. We talked about everything from our favorite hiking spots to our taste in music, from the books we were currently reading to our most embarrassing college stories. She was witty, intelligent, and surprisingly easy to talk to. The conversation flowed naturally, like talking to an old friend rather than a stranger from the internet. As the hours passed and midnight approached, she mentioned that she was actually going to be driving through my area that weekend, heading to visit family a few towns over. The coincidence seemed almost too perfect, but her explanation made sense. Her aunt lived in Riverside, which was only about an hour from where I lived, and she tried to visit every few months. She suggested we meet up for drinks Friday night. Nothing serious, just a casual meeting to see if we clicked as well in person as we did online. My rational mind kept sending up warning signals. This was too good to be true. Beautiful women don't just materialize out of nowhere wanting to meet guys like me. But she had already given me her phone number, and when I called it, she answered. Her voice was sweet, maybe a little nervous, which actually made me feel better. She laughed at my jokes, seemed genuinely interested in our conversation, and by the end of the call, I was convinced this was legitimate. Friday arrived faster than expected. I spent an embarrassing amount of time getting ready, changing my shirt 3 times, styling my hair different ways, and generally acting like a teenager preparing for prom. We had agreed to meet at O'Malley's, a popular bar downtown that was public enough to be safe but intimate enough for conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early, parking my car in the well-lit lot and trying to calm my nerves. 20 minutes passed, then 30. I sent her a text asking if everything was okay, trying not to sound worried or impatient. My phone rang almost immediately. Her name flashed on the screen, and I answered with relief washing over me. "Marcus, I'm so sorry," she said, and I could hear genuine distress in her voice. "This is so embarrassing. My car just died on me. I'm on Route 47, near the old Miller property. The engine just started making this horrible grinding noise, and then everything shut down. I've called for a tow truck, but they said it could be over an hour before they get here. I hate to ask this when we haven't even met yet, but is there any chance you could come get me? I understand if you don't feel comfortable with that." Route 47. I knew it well. It was a back road that connected several small towns, winding through forests and farmland. The Miller property was an abandoned farm about 15 minutes from the bar, a lonely stretch of road that didn't see much traffic, especially at night. Something about the situation felt off, but her voice sounded so genuine, so apologetic and embarrassed. "Are you sure you're safe there?" I asked, buying myself time to think. "Yeah, I've got my doors locked and my phone is fully charged. It's just really dark and kind of creepy out here. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't feeling a little scared." The protective instinct kicked in. What kind of person would I be if I left her stranded on a dark road? I thought about my sister, how I'd want someone to help her if she was in this situation. Against what might have been my better judgment, I agreed to come get her. The drive to Route 47 took me away from the warm lights of downtown, through increasingly empty streets until I was on the dark back roads that crisscrossed our rural county. The October night had brought fog with it, and my headlights could only penetrate so far into the misty darkness. Trees lined both sides of the road, their branches reaching over like skeletal fingers trying to grasp at my car. I slowed down as I approached the area where the old Miller farm should be. The fog was thicker here, rolling across the road in ghostly waves. Then I saw it. A car pulled off to the side of the road, hazard lights blinking weakly through the mist. It was a black sedan, one of those models that could belong to anyone, completely unremarkable except for how alone it looked on this desolate stretch of road. I pulled up behind it, leaving my engine running and my headlights on. Something made me pause before getting out. I tried calling Haley, but the call wouldn't go through. When I looked at my phone, I had no signal. This wasn't unusual for this area. We had plenty of dead zones in the countryside, but it added another layer of unease to an already uncomfortable situation. I grabbed my phone anyway, using its flashlight feature as I stepped out of my car. The night was eerily quiet except for the tick-tick-tick of the hazard lights and the low rumble of my engine. The sedan's windows were completely tinted, so dark that even with my flashlight, I couldn't see inside. The hood was indeed open, just as she'd described. "Haley!" I called out, my voice seeming to be swallowed by the fog. "It's Marcus. I'm here to help." No response. I walked slowly to the driver's side window and knocked gently. "Haley, are you in there?" Still nothing. The silence was oppressive, broken only by my own breathing and the sound of my heart pounding in my chest. I walked around to the front of the car, shining my light on the engine. I'm no mechanic, but even I could tell that nothing seemed obviously wrong. No visible damage, no fluid leaks, no broken belts or hoses. That's when I heard it. The soft click of a car door opening behind me. Relief flooded through me as I turned around, expecting to see Haley stepping out, probably embarrassed about falling asleep or something equally innocent. But the figure that emerged from the car wasn't Haley. It wasn't even close. A man, probably in his 40s, heavy-set with a scraggly beard and eyes that reflected my flashlight like an animal's. He was wearing dark clothes, and something in his hand caught the light. It looked like a crowbar or a tire iron. My body reacted before my mind fully processed the danger, adrenaline flooding my system as every instinct screamed at me to run. "Where you going, buddy?" the man said, his voice rough like gravel. "We've been waiting for you." "We." The word hit me like ice water. I spun around to see another figure emerging from the woods on the opposite side of the road. This one was younger, thinner, but the predatory way he moved told me everything I needed to know about his intentions. I didn't wait to hear what they wanted. I ran, sprinted toward my car with every ounce of speed I could muster. Behind me, I heard cursing and the sound of heavy footsteps. My hands shook as I fumbled for my car door, practically diving inside and slamming the locks just as the bearded man reached my window. He pounded on it with his fist, his face contorted with rage. I threw the car in reverse, not caring about precision, just needing to get away. The tires squealed as I executed the sloppiest three-point turn of my life, the younger man having to jump out of the way to avoid being hit. As I sped away, I saw in my rearview mirror that they were running back to their car. The chase that followed was the most terrifying 10 minutes of my life. They stayed right behind me, their headlights filling my mirrors as I took turns too fast, my car sliding on the damp roads. I knew these roads better than they did, had driven them since I was 16, and I used every bit of that knowledge to my advantage. I turned off my lights at one point, taking a sharp turn onto a dirt road I knew connected to another highway. I could hear their car speed past, missing the turn. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove straight to the police station, my hands still shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. The officers took my statement, sent a unit to check Route 47, but of course, the car was gone by then. They found tire tracks, evidence that multiple vehicles had been there, but without license plates or better descriptions, there wasn't much they could do. It wasn't until I got home and checked social media again that the full scope of what had happened hit me. Haley's profile was gone, completely deleted, but I had screenshotted some of our conversations, paranoid that I'd wake up and find it had all been a dream. When I reverse searched her photos on Google, I found them. They belonged to a real woman named Jennifer who lived in California, had no idea her photos were being used, and had certainly never messaged me. The police detective I spoke with the next day told me I was lucky. There had been similar cases in neighboring counties. Men and women lured to remote locations through dating apps and social media, robbed, beaten, and in one case, held for ransom. They believed it was an organized group, technically sophisticated enough to create believable fake profiles, but old school enough in their actual crimes. I deleted most of my social media after that. What remained, I locked down with every privacy setting available. For months afterward, I would check my rearview mirror obsessively while driving, my heart racing every time I saw the same car behind me for more than a few turns. Even now, years later, when I get a message from someone I don't know, that old fear creeps back in, reminding me of how close I came to something terrible on that foggy October night. The Watcher in the Shadows. My story begins differently from Marcus's, though it ends in a place just as dark. My name is Jennifer, and I was 19 when I learned that having a public social media presence could invite more than just likes and comments into your life. It could invite monsters. I had worked hard to build my following on social media. As an aspiring photographer and lifestyle blogger, I knew that visibility was everything. My account had grown to about 1,100 followers, a mix of friends, family, fellow photography enthusiasts, and yes, strangers who had found my content somehow and decided to stick around. I posted regularly, everything from artistic shots of abandoned buildings to beach photos with friends, from coffee shop aesthetics to outfit of the day posts. It was fun, creative, and felt like a harmless way to express myself and connect with like-minded people. The problems started subtly, so subtly that I initially dismissed them as just part of being a young woman on the internet. It began with a single comment on a beach photo from the previous summer. My friend Sarah and I were laughing at something off camera, both of us in swimsuits, the golden hour light making everything look like a scene from a movie. Mixed in with the usual comments from friends were 3 fire emojis from an account I didn't recognize. The profile belonged to someone calling himself Daniel Brewster. His account was sparse, only 3 photos, all selfies that looked like they'd been taken with an old phone. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, with thinning hair and an uncomfortable smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was following over 200 people, but only had about 80 followers himself. I should have blocked him right then, but I didn't. A few fire emojis seemed harmless enough, and I was still in that phase where every follower counted, where watching my numbers grow gave me a little thrill of validation. But Daniel didn't stop at one comment. Over the next few weeks, he became a constant presence on my posts. Every photo I uploaded, within minutes, there would be Daniel with his comments. They started relatively innocent, beautiful sunset, or great composition, but gradually became more personal and uncomfortable. On a photo of me at a local bookstore, he wrote, "You look better with your hair up like that." On a picture from a friend's birthday dinner, "That dress really shows off your figure." The comments were walking a line, inappropriate enough to make me uncomfortable, but not quite explicit enough that I felt justified making a big deal about it. This is something predators count on, that gray area where their target questions whether they're overreacting, whether they're being too sensitive. I know that now. I didn't then. 2 weeks after his first comment, the direct messages started. The first one seemed almost apologetic. "Hey, I just wanted to say that I really admire your photography. You have a real eye for beauty, probably because you're so beautiful yourself. I know there's an age gap here. I'm probably old enough to be your father, but I just had to tell you how stunning you are." I stared at that message for a long time, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, the part that had been raised to be polite, to not hurt people's feelings, felt like I should at least acknowledge it. So I sent back a simple, "Thanks for the kind words about my photography. That was a mistake." My response, as minimal and unencouraging as it was, seemed to embolden him. The messages came more frequently after that. I would love to take you out somewhere nice, show you how a real gentleman treats a lady. Then, I know you're young, but I could teach you so much about life, about love. And finally, the one that made my skin crawl. I dream about meeting you. I know if we met in person, you'd see how perfect we could be together. That's when I finally blocked him. I should have done it sooner, should have listened to my instincts, but I didn't, and that delay would come back to haunt me. Because blocking someone on social media doesn't make them disappear from real life. It just takes away your ability to see what they're doing. The day I blocked Daniel was a Tuesday. I remember because I had my weekly shift at the local bookstore, and afterward, my sister Emma and I had plans to watch a movie at home. Our parents were away for their anniversary, a week-long cruise they'd been saving for, leaving Emma and me alone in the house. We were both responsible enough, and nothing had ever happened in our quiet neighborhood that would give anyone cause for concern. I got home from my shift around 6 in the evening. The sun was just starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that I would normally have photographed. But as I pulled into our driveway, something caught my attention. There was a car parked across the street, a dark blue sedan with tinted windows. What made it notable wasn't the car itself, but its position. It was parked directly facing our house, not in front of any particular neighbor's home, just sitting there like it was waiting for something. Our street was a quiet cul-de-sac where everyone knew everyone else's vehicles. This car didn't belong to any of our neighbors. I sat in my own car for a moment, watching it, trying to see through the tinted windows. But the combination of the growing darkness and the dark tint made it impossible to see if anyone was inside. I told myself I was being paranoid. It was probably someone visiting a neighbor, or maybe someone had car trouble and pulled over. I grabbed my bags and headed inside, making sure to lock the door behind me, something I didn't always remember to do. Emma was in her room, working on a paper for her English class. She was 17, 2 years younger than me, but in many ways more sensible and level-headed. I thought about mentioning the car to her, but decided against it. No need to worry her over what was probably nothing. As the evening wore on, I found myself periodically checking the window. The car was still there. Its headlights were off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was inside, watching. Around 8 o'clock, I was in the downstairs bathroom getting ready to go out with some friends when I noticed the window was slightly open. Through it, I could see the front of the mysterious car more clearly. The headlights suddenly flicked on, then off again, like a signal or maybe just someone accidentally hitting the switch. But it made my heart race. I quickly closed the window blind and texted my friends that I wasn't feeling well, cancelling our plans. Something about the situation felt wrong, and I didn't want to leave Emma alone. By 9:30, Emma had finished a paper and joined me in the living room for our movie night. I kept the curtains drawn, didn't mention the car, and tried to focus on the comedy we'd chosen. But my mind kept wandering to that sedan outside. Was it still there? Who was inside? What did they want? Around 10:15, I couldn't stand it anymore. I carefully peeked through the curtain. The car was still there, but now I could see a faint glow from inside, like someone was using a phone. The glow illuminated just enough for me to make out a silhouette. Someone was definitely in there, had been sitting in that car for over 4 hours now. I was about to call the police when my phone buzzed. A notification from a social media account I rarely used. One I'd forgotten was still public. Someone using the name Danny B 1975 had sent me a message. My blood ran cold as I read it. "You look really pretty tonight. That pink sweater is my favorite." I was wearing a pink sweater, the same one I'd put on after getting home from work. But I hadn't posted any photos today. Hadn't been anywhere near a window where someone could have seen me, except the bathroom window. When I'd been getting ready earlier, The window had been open. Someone in that car could have seen me. They had seen me. My hands shaking, I grabbed Emma's arm. "We need to go upstairs. Now." She must have seen something in my face because she didn't argue. We went to her room, and I explained everything in hurried whispers. The messages from Daniel, blocking him, the car outside, and now this new message. Emma's face went pale, but she stayed calm. "We need to call the police," she said, reaching for her phone. But before she could dial, we heard something that made both our hearts stop. The unmistakable sound of glass breaking downstairs. Quiet, controlled, like someone trying to be stealthy but not quite succeeding. Then, the soft creak of a window being opened. Emma and I looked at each other in terror. Someone was breaking into our house. Without a word, Emma grabbed my hand and pulled me toward her closet. It was a walk-in, not huge but big enough for both of us to hide inside. We squeezed in among her clothes and shoes, pulling the door almost closed, leaving just a crack to see through. We could hear footsteps downstairs, slow and deliberate. They moved through the house methodically, not like a burglar looking for valuables, but like someone searching for something specific. Or someone. Emma had her phone in her hand. The brightness turned all the way down as she texted 911. Our area had recently implemented text to 911 services, and she managed to send our address and situation before we heard the footsteps on the stairs. Each creak of the old wooden steps felt like a countdown. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle my breathing, could feel Emma trembling beside me. The footsteps reached the hallway, paused at my room first. We heard my door open, could hear him moving around in there, opening my closet, maybe looking under the bed. Then the footsteps came closer, approaching Emma's room. The door, which we'd left ajar in our rush to hide, slowly swung open. Through the crack in the closet door, I could see a figure enter the room. It was too dark to make out details, but the silhouette was definitely male, average height, moving with an unsettling confidence like he had every right to be there. He stood in the center of the room for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then he spoke, and his voice was exactly what I'd imagined from those messages, soft but with an undertone of something darker. "I know you're here, Jennifer. I just want to talk. You didn't have to block me. That hurt my feelings. But I forgive you. I know you're just scared because of what society tells you about age gaps. But what we have is special. What we have. We had nothing." This man was delusional, had built up some fantasy relationship in his head. He moved toward Emma's desk, running his fingers along the surface. "I've been watching you for weeks now. That coffee shop you go to every Thursday? I've been there. That bookstore where you work. I've bought so many books just to see you smile at me. You did smile at me once, remember? Last Tuesday, you handed me my change and smiled, and I knew then that you felt it too. I remembered that transaction. An older man buying a cookbook, paying in cash. Nothing memorable about it except that he'd held eye contact a little too long. That had been him. Daniel. He'd been that close to me, and I hadn't even known I was in danger." He moved toward the bed, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he was going to check the closet. But then, a miracle. The distant sound of sirens. Multiple sirens, getting louder. Daniel froze, his head snapping toward the window. "No, no, no," he muttered. "This isn't how it was supposed to go. We were supposed to have time to talk, to work this out." The sirens were getting closer. Through the crack, I saw him pull something from his pocket. For a terrifying second, I thought it was a weapon, but it was a phone. He was typing something quickly, then he turned and ran from the room. Emma and I stayed frozen in that closet as we heard him thundering down the stairs, heard the back door slam open. The sirens were almost at our house now, and through Emma's window we could see red and blue lights flashing. Only when we heard the police officers announcing themselves did we emerge from the closet. Emma ran downstairs to let them in while I collapsed on her bed, shaking uncontrollably. The police searched the neighborhood, but Daniel was gone. His car was found abandoned a few blocks away, registered to a fake name with a fake address. The investigation revealed that Daniel Brewster wasn't even his real name. The photos on his profile were stolen from someone else's social media, someone who looked nothing like the man who'd broken into our house. The police found evidence that he'd been stalking multiple young women online, though I seemed to be the first one he'd attempted to meet in person. They never caught him. The case went cold after a few months, though I still get periodic check-ins from the detective assigned to it. Emma and I both went to therapy, worked through the trauma as best we could. Our parents installed a comprehensive security system, cameras covering every angle of the house. I made all my social media accounts private after that, carefully vetting every follower request. But even now, years later, I find myself checking cars parked on our street, looking for someone watching. Every time I get a message from someone I don't know, my heart races. The internet had given this man a window into my life, and he'd used it to violate my sense of safety in a way that no amount of privacy settings could fully repair. The collection. The third story in this trilogy of digital horror is perhaps the most insidious because it happened so quietly, so gradually, that by the time I realized something was wrong, the damage was already done. My name is Jessica, and I was 21 when I discovered that someone had been documenting my life without my knowledge, turning me into an unwilling subject of their obsession. Unlike the others who've shared their stories, I wasn't particularly active on social media. I had a personal account with maybe 400 followers, mostly friends from high school and college, family members, and a few acquaintances from various jobs and activities. I posted sporadically, maybe once or twice a week, just little updates about my life, nothing that I thought would draw unwanted attention. The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of those tiny sounds that you dismiss as nothing. I lived with my parents at the time, finishing up my last year of college while saving money. My bedroom was on the ground floor, with a large window facing the backyard. On several occasions over the course of a few weeks, while lying in bed at night or studying at my desk, I would hear a soft tap or scrape against the window. The first time it happened, I assumed it was a tree branch, even though the nearest tree was several feet away. The second time, I thought maybe it was a bird or a bat accidentally flying into the glass. By the third and fourth times, I was getting annoyed but not yet alarmed. I mentioned it to my dad, asking if he could check if anything outside might be causing the noise. He went out the next day, found nothing unusual, and suggested it was probably just the house settling or maybe insects. Old houses make noise, he said, and ours was over 50 years old. I accepted this explanation because what was the alternative? That someone was deliberately making noise at my window? The thought seemed paranoid, the kind of thing that happened in horror movies, not in real life. The sounds continued intermittently for another 2 weeks. Never loud enough to be definitively intentional, never regular enough to establish a pattern, just often enough to keep me slightly on edge. I started sleeping with earbuds in, white noise drowning out any ambient sounds from outside. Then came the message that changed everything. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was in the campus library, working on my senior thesis, when I got a text from an unknown number. My first thought was that it was spam, but the message referenced my name, so I opened it. Jessica, you don't know me, but I need to tell you something important. I found something online that you should know about. I'm in your contemporary literature class, the guy who sits in the back row. I didn't know how else to contact you without making this weird, Please look at this link, but prepare yourself, it's disturbing. The link was to a social media profile on a platform I barely used. The username was JP_collection, and my initials were JP, Jessica Parker. My heart was already racing as the page loaded, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. The profile picture was me. Not a photo I'd taken or posted, but a candid shot of me walking across campus, taken from a distance with what must have been a telephoto lens. I was mid-stride, backpack on one shoulder, completely unaware I was being photographed. But that was just the beginning. The account had 63 posts, and every single one was a photo of me. They went back 3 months, chronicling my life in disturbing detail. There were photos of me at the grocery store, reaching for items on high shelves. Photos of me jogging in the park early in the morning when I thought no one else was around. Photos of me sitting in my car at red lights, singing along to music, thinking I was invisible in my private bubble. The captions were what made my skin crawl. Under a photo of me at a coffee shop, she ordered a vanilla latte with an extra shot today. She seemed tired. I wanted to offer to buy it for her. Under a photo of me laughing with friends, she's so beautiful when she laughs. I made note of the joke so I can tell it to her someday. Under a photo of me looking at my phone with a frown, someone upset her today. When we're together, I'll never let anyone hurt her. As disturbing as these were, they weren't the worst ones. The worst ones were the recent photos, the ones taken at my house. There I was in my backyard, reading a book on the porch. There I was through the kitchen window, helping my mom with dinner. And then, the ones that made me feel physically ill, photos taken through my bedroom window. Multiple photos of me at my desk, studying, completely unaware that someone was standing in my backyard, watching me, photographing me. Photos of me in my pajamas, getting ready for bed. One particularly horrifying shot showed me in just a towel, having just returned from the shower. The caption read, "She's perfect. Everything I imagined and more." The most recent photo had been posted just 2 days ago. It showed me sleeping, taken from outside my window. The angle suggested the photographer had been standing very close to the glass, possibly with the camera pressed against it. That would explain the tapping sounds. They weren't random noises or settling houses or insects. They were the sounds of someone positioning their camera against my window to get the perfect shot. I sat in that library, surrounded by other students going about their normal day, and felt my world tilt off its axis. Someone had been watching me for months, documenting my every move, building some sick fantasy around my daily life. They knew where I lived, where I went to school, where I shopped, where I jogged. They had turned me into the star of their own twisted reality show without my knowledge or consent. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone as I scrolled through the comments on these photos. Most were from what appeared to be fake accounts, but some seemed real, and they were encouraging this behavior. "She's beautiful, bro. You should talk to her. Love the dedication, man. She'll appreciate it when she knows how much you care. Keep going. These are great." There were even discussions in the comments about my routines, people analyzing when I seemed happiest, speculating about whether I had a boyfriend, discussing what kind of gifts I might like. It was a community of strangers dissecting my life like I was a character in a TV show, not a real person who deserved privacy and safety. I screenshotted everything, my fingers working on autopilot while my mind reeled. Then I called my dad, barely able to get the words out through my tears. He left work immediately, picked me up from campus, and we went straight to the police station. The detective who took my case was sympathetic but honest about the challenges. The account wasn't using a real name, the email associated with it was a throwaway, and whoever was behind it was careful enough not to include any identifying information in the photos. They could try to track the IP address, but if the person was using a VPN or public Wi-Fi, that would lead nowhere. What they could do was increase patrols around our house and advise us on security measures. They also reached out to the social media platform to get the account removed and to try to obtain any information about who created it. The account was deleted within 24 hours, but the platform claimed they couldn't provide user information without a warrant, which would take time to obtain. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in my room. The window that had once let in pleasant morning light now felt like a giant eye, watching me. My parents moved me to the guest room upstairs while my dad installed motion sensor lights around the backyard and new locks on all the windows. The next few days were a blur of police interviews, changing all my social media settings to private, and looking over my shoulder constantly. The guy from my literature class who had messaged me turned out to be legitimate, just a concerned classmate who had stumbled onto the profile while looking for photography inspiration for a project. He'd recognized me and felt obligated to tell me, for which I was grateful even as I wished I could unknow what I now knew. Then, 3 days after discovering the profile, something happened that shifted the investigation into a different gear. I got home from a shortened day at school, my mom having picked me up rather than letting me drive myself. We'd established new safety protocols, no going anywhere alone, constant check-ins, and varying our routes and schedules as much as possible. As we pulled into our driveway, I noticed something tucked under the windshield wiper of my car, which had been parked at home all day. It looked like a piece of paper or a flyer. My mom saw it too and immediately told me to stay in her car while she checked it out. But I followed her anyway, unable to suppress my need to know what it was. It was a printed photo. One of me, obviously taken recently because I was wearing the sweater I'd bought just the previous week. But this wasn't taken from a distance like the others. This was close, maybe only 10 feet away, showing me walking out of a store at the mall. On the back, written in neat handwriting, was a message that made my blood run cold. The account may be gone, but my feelings aren't. You're even more beautiful in person than in pictures. We're meant to be together, Jessica. Stop hiding from destiny. My mom immediately called the police while ushering me inside. This was direct contact, escalation, and it gave the investigation new urgency. The detective arrived within an hour, taking the photo and paper for evidence, hoping for fingerprints or any other identifying marks. That night, as my family tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy over dinner, we heard it. A tap at the dining room window. Then another. Then a scraping sound, deliberate and prolonged. My dad jumped up, phone already in hand, calling 911, while my mom pulled me away from the window. But I had to look. I had to see who had been tormenting me. There, barely visible in the darkness, but caught momentarily in the motion sensor light, was a figure, thin, tall, wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low. He was holding something up to the window, and I realized with horror that it was a camera. Even as we made eye contact, even as he must have known we'd seen him, he took one more photo, the flash illuminating his face for just a second. I didn't recognize him. He looked young, maybe mid-20s, with an unremarkable face that could belong to any of 1,000 people I'd passed on the street without noticing. But the expression on his face in that split second of illumination would haunt me for years. It wasn't anger or fear at being caught. It was disappointment, like we'd ruined some special moment he'd been trying to capture. Then he ran. My dad rushed outside, but the intruder had already vanished into the darkness. The police arrived within minutes, but searching the neighborhood turned up nothing. He'd simply melted away into the night, leaving behind only the memory of that flash and the growing pile of evidence that someone was dangerously obsessed with me. The photo evidence did yield something useful. There were partial fingerprints on the paper, and when run through the system, They matched a man named Timothy Vance, 26 years old, with a previous arrest for harassment and stalking in another state. His driver's license photo matched the face I'd seen in the window. Finally, we had a name, a face to put to the terror. But Timothy Vance had disappeared. His last known address was a boarding house where he'd been evicted 2 months prior. His car was found abandoned in a parking garage downtown, covered in dust like it hadn't been moved in weeks. He had no job, no family in the area, no credit card activity. He was a ghost, existing only in the shadows and in the photos he took of me. The police theorized that he was living rough, possibly in the woods behind our neighborhood or in one of the many abandoned buildings around town. They increased their search efforts, but finding one person who didn't want to be found in a town surrounded by forests and old industrial sites was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Meanwhile, my life had become a prison of precautions. I couldn't go anywhere alone, couldn't post anything online, couldn't even sit by a window without wondering if he was out there watching. I started online therapy because even the thought of sitting in a waiting room where he might find me was too much. My grades suffered, my friendships strained under the weight of my new restrictions and constant fear. 2 weeks after the window incident, there was a breakthrough, though not the kind we'd hoped for. Timothy was spotted at a gas station 2 towns over, recognized by a clerk who'd seen his photo on the local news. By the time police arrived, he was gone, but they pulled the security footage. He looked disheveled, thinner than in his license photo, with the hollow eyes of someone running on obsession and little else. But more disturbing was what they found when they reviewed the footage from the hours before and after his appearance. He'd been there multiple times, always buying the same things: water, energy bars, and disposable cameras. Dozens of disposable cameras over the course of several weeks. The kind that couldn't be tracked or hacked, that didn't leave digital footprints. The implications made me sick. How many photos had he taken? How many undeveloped images of me were out there in whatever hole he was hiding in? The digital collection had been just the tip of the iceberg, the ones he felt comfortable sharing. What else did he have? The answer came in the worst possible way. Acting on a tip from a hiker who'd seen someone matching Timothy's description near an old ranger station in the state forest, police found his hideout. It was exactly as horrifying as we'd feared, and somehow worse. The abandoned station had been transformed into a shrine. Every wall was covered with photos of me. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Some printed from digital files, others developed from those disposable cameras, creating a timeline of my life over the past 6 months. There were detailed notes about my routines, my preferences, conversations he'd overheard, even drawings of what he imagined our future house would look like, our future children. In one corner was a makeshift bed surrounded by the most recent photos, the ones taken through my bedroom window. The police psychologist who reviewed the scene said it was one of the most extensive stalking shrines she'd ever seen, representing hundreds of hours of observation and documentation. But Timothy wasn't there. He'd cleared out recently, leaving behind only the photos he couldn't carry. Where he'd gone was anyone's guess. The manhunt intensified, his face plastered on every news channel and social media platform. But he'd proven himself capable of staying hidden, and the forest was vast. My family made the decision to move, not just to a different house, but to a different state entirely. My dad found a job transfer. My mom worked remotely anyway, and I switched to online classes to finish my degree. The detective promised they'd keep looking, that the case would remain active, but we all knew the reality. Unless Timothy made a mistake, unless he surfaced somewhere, he could remain hidden indefinitely. The moving day was surreal, packing up my life while knowing that somewhere out there, a man had his own version of it wallpapered on the walls of an abandoned building. As we drove away from the only home I'd ever known, I found myself looking at every car we passed, every person on the street, wondering if it was him, wondering if he was watching even then. We settled into our new life 1,500 miles away. New house, new routines, new phone numbers, everything designed to make us unfindable. I legally changed my name, deleted every trace of my old identity online, and started the slow process of rebuilding a life that felt safe. But safety, I learned, is as much a state of mind as a physical reality. Even now, years later, in a different city with a different name, I find myself checking over my shoulder. Every time I hear an unexplained noise at night, my heart races. Every time someone takes a photo in public, and I might be in the background, I wonder who will see it, whether it will somehow lead him back to me. The detective still sends me updates occasionally. There have been sightings, always unconfirmed, always just far enough behind that he's gone by the time they investigate. He's become something of a local legend in my old town, the ghost in the woods, the watcher in the shadows. Some people even doubt he existed, think the whole thing was exaggerated or fabricated. But I know the truth. I lived it. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder if he's still out there with those photos, still adding to his collection somehow, still living in that fantasy world where we're meant to be together. The internet had given him a window into my life, but his obsession had turned that window into a door, one that even now I'm not sure is fully closed. Lessons from the dark side. These 3 stories, while each unique in their terror, share common threads that weave through the fabric of our modern digital existence. They serve as cautionary tales about the dark potential that lurks beneath the surface of our interconnected world, where the line between public and private, virtual and real, has become increasingly blurred. Marcus learned that verification isn't always enough, that even the most elaborate fake profiles can seem real when criminals put in the effort. The woman whose photos were stolen to create Haley Morrison probably never knew her image was being used to lure men into dangerous situations. How many of us have photos online that could be harvested for similar purposes? How many fake profiles exist right now, building false connections with unsuspecting victims? The criminal organization that targeted Marcus understood something fundamental about human psychology. We want to believe in the possibility of connection, of serendipitous meetings with attractive strangers who find us interesting. They exploited that hope, that fundamental human need for connection, and weaponized it. The fact that Marcus researched the profile, checked for signs of authenticity, and still fell for the trap shows how sophisticated these operations have become. Jennifer's story reveals the insidious nature of online harassment and how it can escalate into real-world violence. Daniel, or whoever he really was, used the accessibility of social media to build a fantasy relationship with someone who didn't even know he existed. Every photo Jennifer posted, every piece of information she shared, became fuel for his delusion. The seemingly harmless act of having a public profile became an invitation for invasion, not just of privacy but of physical safety. The progression from online comments to direct messages to physical stalking shows how digital obsession can manifest in dangerous reality. The fact that he knew her workplace, had been close enough to hand her change, demonstrates how online information can be used to map out someone's entire life. Jennifer and Emma's terror in that closet, listening to a delusional man walk through their house claiming a relationship that existed only in his mind, represents every person's nightmare about the dangers of online exposure. Jessica's experience might be the most psychologically damaging because of its duration and intensity. For months, she was living in a reality show she didn't know existed, where every mundane moment of her life was being documented and analyzed by strangers on the internet. The violation of privacy was so complete, so invasive, that even changing her name and moving across the country couldn't fully restore her sense of safety. The concept of someone creating a shrine of photos, of building an entire fantasy life around someone who doesn't know they exist, speaks to a particular kind of modern horror. Before the internet, stalkers had to work harder, take more risks. Now, with social media, smartphones, and easily accessible photography equipment, someone can build an extensive collection of their victim's life while barely leaving their room. What makes Jessica's story particularly chilling is the community aspect. It wasn't just one person watching her. It was dozens, maybe hundreds, all participating in this violation of her privacy. They discussed her like she was a character in their favorite show, not a real person with rights and feelings. This dehumanization, this reduction of a person to content to be consumed, reflects something deeply troubling about how we interact with each other online. These stories force us to confront uncomfortable questions about the price of our digital visibility. Every photo we post, every location we tag, every piece of information we share, becomes part of a digital footprint that can be tracked, analyzed, and exploited. The convenience of staying connected with friends and family comes with the risk of opening our lives to those who wish us harm. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of these stories is how they've become increasingly common. Talk to anyone who maintains an active social media presence, especially young women, and they'll likely have their own stories of inappropriate messages, of strangers who seem to know too much about them, of that creeping feeling that someone is watching. These aren't isolated incidents anymore. They're part of the landscape of existing online. The question then becomes, how do we navigate this digital world safely while still maintaining the connections and communities that make it valuable? The answer isn't simple. It requires constant vigilance, regular updates to privacy settings, careful consideration of what we share and with whom. It means teaching young people not just how to use technology, but how to recognize the warning signs of dangerous behavior online. We need to have conversations about the real-world consequences of online actions, about how the sense of anonymity and distance that the internet provides can embolden predators. We need better tools for tracking and prosecuting online stalkers and harassers, better support systems for victims, and better education about digital safety. These three individuals, Marcus, Jennifer, and Jessica, survived their encounters with the dark side of social media, but they carry the scars of those experiences. Marcus still checks his rear-view mirror obsessively. Jennifer can't post a photo without wondering who might be watching. Jessica lives under a different name, always looking over her shoulder, wondering if her past will catch up with her. Their stories serve as warnings, as reminders that the digital world we've created, for all its benefits and conveniences, has also created new avenues for very old dangers. Predation, obsession, and violence have found new expressions in our interconnected age, and we must remain vigilant, protective of ourselves and each other, as we navigate this brave new world. The internet promised to bring us closer together, and in many ways it has. But it's also brought dangers closer to our doorsteps, into our homes, into the most private moments of our lives. These stories remind us that behind every screen is a real person, and not all of them have good intentions. In the age of social media, we must balance our desire for connection with the need for protection, our impulse to share with the imperative to stay safe. As technology continues to evolve, as new platforms emerge and new ways of connecting develop, these dangers will evolve too. The predators will find new methods, new ways to exploit our trust and invade our privacy. But by sharing these stories, by learning from these experiences, we can hopefully stay one step ahead, protecting ourselves and our loved ones from those who would use our digital presence against us. The dark side of social media is real, it's dangerous, and it's closer than we think. But with awareness, caution, and community support, we can navigate it safely, maintaining the benefits of our connected world while protecting ourselves from its dangers. These stories aren't meant to make us afraid of technology, but to make us respectful of its power and aware of its potential for both connection and harm. In the end, the most powerful tool we have against online predators is knowledge. Knowledge of their tactics, awareness of the warning signs, and the wisdom to trust our instincts when something feels wrong. Marcus, Jennifer, and Jessica learned these lessons the hard way. Hopefully, by sharing their stories, others won't have to. The perfect roommate. My name is Rachel, and I learned the hard way that sometimes the most dangerous predators come with 5-star reviews and verified profiles. It started when I needed to find a roommate for my apartment in Chicago. The rent was killing me, and splitting it was the only way I could afford to stay in the city while finishing my master's degree. I posted on several roommate-finding websites and social media groups, carefully crafting my listing to attract the right kind of person. Young professional or graduate student, clean, respectful, no pets, no smoking. Within days, I had dozens of responses, but one stood out immediately. Her name was Claire Watson, and her profile was immaculate. She had connected her social media accounts to the Roommate app, showing a feed full of volunteer work, professional achievements, and wholesome activities. Her previous roommates had left glowing reviews, talking about how considerate she was, how she always paid rent on time, how she even baked cookies for the apartment building. She was 26, worked as a graphic designer for a non-profit, and her background check came back spotless. We video chatted twice before meeting in person. She was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely excited about the apartment. She asked all the right questions about neighborhood safety, local grocery stores, and the building's maintenance history. When we met for coffee, she brought a folder with her references, pay stubs, and even a letter of recommendation from her previous landlord. Everything about Claire screamed perfect roommate, and I desperately needed someone to help with rent. I ignored the tiny voice in my head that said something felt rehearsed about her answers, too polished, like she was playing a role. Looking back, I should have trusted that instinct. Claire moved in on a Saturday morning in September. She didn't have much stuff, just a few boxes and suitcases, which she said was because she'd been living minimally after a bad breakup. She decorated her room simply but tastefully, and within a week, it felt like she'd always lived there. She kept to our agreed-upon cleaning schedule, was quiet during my study hours, and even shared her streaming service passwords with me. For the first month, everything was perfect. Too perfect, I realize now. Claire was the ideal roommate in every way, almost like she'd studied a manual on how to be one. She never disagreed with anything, never had a bad day, never showed any real personality beyond pleasant agreeability. It was like living with a very nice robot. The first crack in her facade appeared 6 weeks after she moved in. I came home early from class with a migraine and found her in my room. She was standing at my desk, my laptop open in front of her, completely absorbed in whatever she was reading. When I cleared my throat, she spun around with an expression of such rage that I actually stepped backward. Then, in a blink, her face transformed back into its usual pleasant smile. "Oh, Rachel, you scared me," she laughed, but her eyes remained cold. "I was just looking for a pen, and your laptop was making noise, so I wanted to make sure everything was okay." My laptop had been closed when I left, and password protected, but I was so taken aback by that flash of anger that I just nodded and said it was fine. She left my room, and I immediately checked my computer. The browser history had been cleared, but I found recently opened files that I hadn't touched in weeks. Personal documents, tax returns, even my therapy session notes that I kept in a password-protected folder. I changed all my passwords that night and put a lock on my bedroom door, telling Claire it was because maintenance workers would be coming through the building. She smiled and said she understood completely, but I caught her trying my doorknob twice over the next few days when she thought I was asleep. Things escalated from there. I started noticing small things going missing. Not valuable items, but personal ones. A pair of earrings my grandmother had given me, a specific lipstick I wore often, the t-shirt I slept in most nights. When I asked Claire if she'd seen them, she helped me look, expressing concern about possible break-ins. Then I started finding things that weren't mine. A men's watch in the bathroom drawer, a prescription bottle with someone else's name under the kitchen sink, a driver's license belonging to someone named David Chan tucked between the couch cushions. When I showed Claire the license, suggesting we try to return it to its owner, she quickly took it from me, saying she'd handle it. The license disappeared, and when I asked about it later, she claimed she didn't know what I was talking about. My sleep started suffering. I would wake up at odd hours with the feeling that someone was in my room, but the door was always locked. Once, I could have sworn I heard breathing that wasn't my own, but when I turned on the light, I was alone. I started sleeping with a chair propped against the door for extra security. 3 months into our living arrangement, I made a discovery that changed everything. I was cleaning the apartment while Claire was supposedly at work when I noticed her bedroom door was slightly open. She usually kept it locked, even when she was home, claiming she valued her privacy. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pushed the door open. Her room looked normal at first glance, but something felt off. Then I realized what it was. The room was staged, like a movie set. The books on her shelf were all fake, just cardboard props. The clothes in her partially open closet were all brand new, tags still attached. The photos on her dresser, which showed her with what I assumed was family, were stock photos with her face poorly photoshopped in. But the worst discovery was under her bed. Boxes and boxes of documents, IDs, credit cards, and personal items, none of them hers. I recognized my missing earrings, my lipstick, my t-shirt. But there were also things belonging to strangers. Dozens of driver's licenses, passports, social security cards, and notebooks filled with detailed observations about people. One of them was about me. She had documented everything. My daily routine, my passwords that she'd somehow figured out, my medical history, my family relationships, my financial information. There were notes about my mannerisms, phrases I used often, how I styled my hair. It was like she was studying me, learning how to be me. There were other notebooks too, about other people. Some entries were crossed out with notes like completed or moved on. One name, Sarah Mitchell, looked familiar. I googled it on my phone and found a news article from 6 months ago. Sarah Mitchell, a graduate student, had disappeared from her apartment in Boston. Her roommate, who had only lived with her for 3 months, had also vanished. The roommate's name was listed as Claire Watson. My hands shaking, I took photos of everything with my phone, then carefully put it all back exactly as I'd found it. I left the apartment immediately, went straight to the police station, and told them everything. They took my report seriously, especially when I showed them the photos. They ran Claire Watson through their system and found nothing. The person living in my apartment didn't exist, at least not officially. The police went to my apartment that afternoon, but Claire was gone. Her room was completely empty, like she'd never been there at all. Even the fake books and props were gone. The only thing left was a note on my pillow, written in handwriting that looked disturbingly like my own. "Thanks for everything, Rachel. I learned so much from you." The investigation revealed that Claire, or whoever she really was, had been doing this for years. Moving in with people, studying them, stealing their identities, and then disappearing. Several of her former roommates had reported identity theft months after she'd vanished, finding credit cards opened in their names, loans taken out using their information. Some reported that someone had been impersonating them online, applying for jobs with their resumes, even contacting their families. Sarah Mitchell was never found, and the police suspected Claire might have taken over her identity completely. The real Claire Watson had died in a car accident 5 years ago, and someone had been using her identity ever since. Who this person really was remained a mystery. I had to move out of that apartment. I couldn't sleep there knowing she had a key, knowing she'd studied me so intensely. I stayed with friends while I found a new place, a studio this time. No roommates. I put fraud alerts on all my accounts, changed every password, even legally changed my middle name to make identity theft harder. But the paranoia lingers. Sometimes I get calls for job interviews I never applied for. Once, a friend texted asking why I'd been so rude to her at a coffee shop I'd never been to. Someone out there knows everything about me, has practiced being me, and I have no idea when or if they'll use that knowledge. The internet made it so easy for her to create a false identity, to seem trustworthy and verified. But it also made it easy for her to disappear completely, to become someone else with a few keystrokes. I learned that in our digital age, identity is both more important and more fragile than ever. Anyone can pretend to be anyone, and by the time you realize the person living in your home isn't who they claim to be, it might already be too late. The fitness influencer. My journey into digital horror began with something as innocent as trying to get in shape. My name is Alex, and I was 27 when I decided to document my fitness transformation online. I'd gained weight during a stressful period at work, and publicly sharing my journey seemed like a good way to hold myself accountable. I created a fitness-focused account, posting daily workouts, healthy meals, and progress photos. At first, my only followers were supportive friends and family. But as I started seeing results and sharing more content, my following grew. Within 6 months, I had about 3,000 followers, mostly other people on their own fitness journeys. Among my regular commenters was someone with the username FitCoach91. Their comments were always encouraging but specifically helpful. They'd point out form improvements, suggest modifications for exercises, and share scientific articles about nutrition and training. When they'd met me offering free online coaching, I was intrigued. They said they were a certified personal trainer who helped people online for free as a way of giving back to the fitness community. We started with weekly check-ins through video calls. The person on the other end introduced themselves as Jordan, a 30-something trainer from Colorado. They always had their camera positioned so I could only see them from the chest down during our training sessions, explaining they were camera shy but wanted me to see their form demonstrations. Their advice was solid, and following their customized workout plan, I saw dramatic improvements. Jordan knew exactly how to motivate me. They remembered every detail I shared, celebrated my victories, and helped me work through setbacks. They suggested I start sharing more personal content to connect with my audience, encouraging me to post about my daily routine, my job stress that led to weight gain, my relationship struggles. They said vulnerability would make me more relatable and grow my following. And it worked. My follower count climbed to 10,000 as I shared more of my life. Jordan suggested I add location tags to my posts to attract local followers who might want to train together. They recommended specific gyms, restaurants, and running routes that would photograph well. They even knew the best times to post for maximum engagement in my time zone, though I'd never told them exactly where I lived. 6 months into our coaching relationship, Jordan suggested we finally meet in person. They said they were traveling to my city for a fitness convention and wanted to surprise me with a free personal training session. We arranged to meet at my regular gym at 5 a.m., when it would be empty enough to film content without disturbing others. I arrived at the gym early, excited and nervous to finally meet this person who'd become such a big part of my life. The gym was nearly empty, just me and one other person on the treadmills at the far end. I warmed up while waiting, checking my phone repeatedly. Jordan texted that they were running late, but told me to start with squats and they'd be there soon. 20 minutes passed, then 30. I was in the middle of a set when I noticed something odd. The person on the treadmill had been running at the exact same pace the entire time I'd been there, never changing speed or incline, and they were wearing a hat and hood despite the gym being warm, their face completely obscured. I texted Jordan asking for an ETA. The response came immediately. I'm already here. Third treadmill from the left. My blood went cold. I looked at the person on the treadmill, and they had stopped running, standing perfectly still, facing me. They started walking toward me, and every instinct screamed at me to run. But I was frozen, watching this figure approach. They stopped about 10 feet away and pulled back their hood. It wasn't Jordan from our video calls. It was someone I'd never seen before, much older, with hollow eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. "You're even more beautiful in person," they said in a voice nothing like Jordan's. "I've been watching you grow for so long. I'm so proud of how far you've come." I grabbed my things and ran, literally ran, out of the gym. They followed, calling after me. "Don't you want to know how I helped you? Don't you want to know why you succeeded?" I drove home in a panic, running red lights, constantly checking my mirrors. When I got to my apartment building, I realized with horror that this person knew where I lived. They knew everything about me because I'd shared it all online, thinking I was building a supportive community. I called the police, but what could I report? That my online fitness coach wasn't who they said they were? That wasn't a crime. They suggested I block the person and be more careful about meeting internet strangers. But it wasn't that simple. The real horror started that night. My fitness account, which I'd built over 18 months, started posting on its own. Videos I'd never taken, photos from angles that suggested someone else was holding the camera, captions written in my voice but saying things I'd never say, revealing personal information I'd never share publicly. One post showed my apartment building from the outside with a caption, "Love my morning runs from here." Another showed my car in its parking spot with the license plate visible. A video appeared of me sleeping, clearly taken from inside my bedroom, with the caption, "Rest day is so important for muscle recovery." I tried to delete the posts, but I was locked out of my account. The password had been changed. The recovery email switched to something I didn't recognize. I watched helplessly as this person used my platform to share increasingly invasive content. They posted screenshots of our private conversations, but edited to make it seem like we were in a relationship. My real friends started reaching out, concerned and confused. The person controlling my account was responding to DMs as me, telling people we'd moved in together, that we were planning to launch a fitness business as a couple. They were systematically destroying my life while wearing my digital identity like a mask. Then came the live stream. A notification went out to all 10,000 of my followers that I was going live for a special announcement. I watched in horror on a friend's phone as the stream started. It showed my apartment, the camera moving through it like a tour. The person behind the camera never spoke, but text overlays appeared. "This is where she cooks her meal prep. This is where she films her workout videos. This is where she sleeps." The stream had hundreds of viewers, many expressing concern in the comments. Some recognized that something was wrong, but others seemed to think it was part of some interactive content. The person streaming had access to everything, showing personal items, mail with my full name and address visible. Even my work schedule stuck to the refrigerator. I was at a friend's house watching this unfold, afraid to go home. The police were taking it more seriously now, but they needed time to get warrants for the platform's data, to try to track who was behind this. Meanwhile, the stream continued for 3 hours, a complete violation of my privacy broadcast to strangers on the internet. When it finally ended, a final post appeared on the account. It was a photo of me from that morning at the gym, taken from behind while I was doing squats. The caption read, "Phase 1 complete. Time for Phase 2. I never found out what Phase 2 was supposed to be. With the help of law enforcement and the platform's safety team, the account was finally shut down. But the damage was done. Those photos, videos, and streams were out there forever, screenshotted and shared beyond my control. I had to move apartments, change jobs after my employer saw the disturbing content, and essentially disappear from the internet entirely. The investigation revealed that Jordan was actually someone named Robert Walsh, a 45-year-old man with a history of stalking and cybercrime. He'd been using sophisticated software to mask his IP address and had multiple fake profiles across various fitness platforms. He'd targeted dozens of people, though I was the first he'd escalated with to this degree. He was eventually arrested when he tried the same scheme with another victim who was actually an undercover officer. In his apartment, they found detailed files on over 100 fitness influencers, including everything about me: workout schedules, meal plans, personal information, and thousands of photos and videos, many taken without our knowledge. He'd been at that gym for months, becoming a background fixture no one noticed. He'd filmed me working out countless times, studied my form, learned my routines. His coaching advice had been genuinely helpful because he'd spent so much time analyzing my movements, figuring out exactly what I needed to hear. It was manipulation at its most insidious, using genuine help as a Trojan horse for obsession. The experience taught me that sharing your journey online isn't just sharing your successes and struggles. It's sharing your vulnerabilities, your patterns, your life. And there are people out there who will take that information and use it in ways you never imagined. The fitness community online can be incredibly supportive, but it can also attract predators who see your transformation as something they want to own or control. I still work out, still maintain my health, but I do it privately now. No progress photos, no gym check-ins, no documentation of my journey. Because I learned that when you share your transformation online, you're not just inspiring others. You're also potentially giving someone a roadmap to your life, one that they might follow for reasons that have nothing to do with fitness and everything to do with obsession. The art collector. Digital art was supposed to be my escape from the corporate world. My name is Maya, and I'd been posting my illustrations online since college, slowly building a following of people who appreciated my surreal, dreamlike style. It was never about fame or money, just the joy of creating and sharing with a community that understood my vision. My account had about 8,000 followers, mostly other artists and art enthusiasts. I posted new pieces weekly, sometimes process videos showing how I created certain effects, occasionally selfies from art shows or my cluttered studio. It felt like a safe space, a creative bubble separate from the harsh realities of my day job in accounting. Among my regular supporters was an account called Patron of Arts 44. They commented thoughtfully on every piece, bought prints regularly through my online store, and even commissioned a few custom pieces. Their commissions were always interesting, abstract concepts that pushed my creative boundaries. They paid well and promptly, never haggled over prices, and always expressed genuine appreciation for the finished work. Over the course of a year, Patron of Arts 44 became my biggest supporter. They promoted my work on their own account, which seemed to be dedicated to showcasing emerging artists. They had considerable influence in online art communities, and their endorsement brought me hundreds of new followers and several gallery opportunities. When they messaged me about featuring my work in a private exhibition they were curating, I was thrilled. They explained they were a wealthy collector who hosted intimate art shows at their estate for other collectors and gallerists. It would be a chance to sell original pieces at premium prices and network with people who could advance my career. The exhibition was scheduled for a weekend in November. They offered to cover all shipping costs for my artwork and even pay for my travel and accommodation. They sent professional-looking contracts, gallery-style promotional materials featuring my work, and even photos of the exhibition space, a stunning modern home with perfect lighting and enormous walls ideal for displaying art. 2 weeks before the exhibition, things started feeling off. They requested I send not just the pieces for sale, but also personal items that inspired my work. They wanted my sketchbooks, my childhood drawings they'd heard me mention in interviews, even the lucky paintbrush I'd talked about in a post years ago. They said it would add authenticity to the exhibition, help buyers understand my artistic journey. When I hesitated, they became insistent, almost aggressive. They reminded me of all they'd done for my career, how much they'd invested in my success. They said other artists they'd featured had shared similar items and saw their careers skyrocket afterward. They even offered to buy the personal items outright for an absurd amount of money. I agreed to send some sketchbooks, but held firm on the childhood drawings and personal tools. They seemed disappointed, but accepted my decision. I carefully packed 15 original pieces and 5 sketchbooks, using the prepaid shipping labels they'd provided. The package was insured for $50,000, which seemed excessive but reassuring. The day I was supposed to fly out for the exhibition, I received a message that the event had to be postponed due to a family emergency. They apologized profusely and promised to reschedule soon. They said my artwork had arrived safely and was being stored in a climate-controlled facility until the new date was set. A week passed with no word. Then 2 weeks. My messages went unread. The Patron of Art's 44 account went silent. No new posts or activity. Panic set in as I realized I'd sent over a year's worth of original work to someone I'd never met, to an address I'd never verified beyond Google Maps. I contacted the shipping company and found that the package had been delivered to a commercial warehouse, not the residential address I'd been shown. The warehouse had no record of Patron of Art's 44 or any art exhibition. The unit the package was delivered to had been rented with cash under a fake name and was already vacant when they checked. My artwork was gone. 15 original pieces that represented hundreds of hours of work, plus sketchbooks containing ideas for future projects. The police said it was a civil matter unless I could prove theft rather than a business deal gone bad. The contracts I'd signed were technically legitimate, even if the person signing them wasn't who they claimed to be. But losing the artwork was just the beginning of the nightmare. A month later, I started seeing my art in places it shouldn't be. Not just being resold, but being claimed by other artists. New accounts popped up on various platforms, each claiming to be the original creator of my work. They had my pieces, my style, even variations of my artist name. They were selling prints, taking commissions, building followings based on my creativity. When I tried to report these accounts for art theft, I faced a horrible realization. They had my original pieces, my sketchbooks with dated entries. They could prove they possessed the physical artwork, while all I had were digital files and photos. Some platforms sided with them, saying I was the one stealing their work. One account took it further. They started posting new artwork that was clearly mine, pieces I'd been working on but hadn't shared yet. That's when I understood they hadn't just stolen my finished work. They had my sketchbooks with my incomplete ideas, my artistic process, my creative DNA. They were using my own sketches as templates, creating knockoff versions of art I hadn't even finished yet. The psychological impact was devastating. Every time I sat down to create, I wondered if someone else would claim it as theirs. My unique style, developed over years, was being diluted and commercialized by strangers. Gallery owners who'd been interested in my work started questioning whether I was the real artist or just another imitator. I hired a lawyer, but the case was complicated. The fake accounts were registered in different countries with different intellectual property laws. The warehouse was a dead end. Patron of Art's 44 had vanished completely, their account deleted, their payment methods all untraceable cryptocurrency transactions. 6 months into this nightmare, I received an anonymous email. It contained photos of my artwork hanging in someone's home. Not prints, but my original pieces, displayed in what looked like a private gallery. The email had no text, just image after image of my work imprisoned in someone's collection. I reverse searched the images, analyzed the metadata, looked for any clue about where these photos were taken. Nothing. But every few weeks, new photos would arrive. My art in different lighting, from different angles, sometimes with a shadowy figure partially visible in the reflection of the glass. Then came the most disturbing email. It was a video of someone painting, copying my exact technique, recreating one of my pieces stroke for stroke. They wore gloves, so I couldn't see their hands clearly, but the way they moved, the way they held the brush, it was like watching myself paint. At the end of the video, they signed it with my signature, perfectly forged. The police cybercrime unit got involved at this point, tracing the emails through various proxies and VPNs. They discovered that Patron of Arts 44 was part of a larger operation, a ring of art thieves who specialized in emerging digital artists. They would build trust over months or years, then execute elaborate schemes to steal both physical and intellectual property. The investigation revealed at least 30 other artists had been targeted. Some had lost artwork, others had their entire online presence hijacked. The thieves would study our techniques, our stories, our creative processes, then either sell the stolen work or create an entire fake artist persona based on our aesthetic. They never caught the people behind it. The trail went cold at a server farm in Eastern Europe. My artwork was never recovered. The fake accounts kept multiplying faster than I could report them. My artistic identity had been fractured and scattered across the internet, worn by strangers like a costume. I had to completely rebrand. New artist name, new style, new everything. I developed a completely different aesthetic, abandoning the surreal dreamscapes that had defined my work. It was like killing a part of myself, but it was the only way to move forward. I couldn't create in my own style anymore because my style had been stolen, replicated, and mass-produced. Now, I only sell art in person at local shows. No online presence, no digital footprint. I watch other artists sharing their work online, building communities, finding success, and I feel a mixture of envy and fear for them, because I know how easily that beautiful creative exchange can be exploited. The internet was supposed to democratize art, make it accessible to everyone, and it did. But it also made artists vulnerable in ways we never imagined. Our creativity, our vision, our artistic souls can be captured, copied, and claimed by anyone with enough patience and malice. The digital age has given artists unprecedented reach, but it's also given thieves unprecedented access to our most personal expressions. My story is a cautionary tale for digital artists. That supportive patron might be studying you, not your art. Those commissioned pieces might be gathering intelligence, not supporting your career. The online art community is mostly beautiful and supportive, but predators lurk there too, ones who don't just want to own art, but to own the artist's very identity. The dating app disaster. Modern dating is a minefield of red flags and ghosting. But my experience with dating apps turned into something far more sinister. I'm Tom, and at 32, I thought I was savvy enough to navigate online dating safely. I had all the usual rules: meet in public places, tell friends where I'm going, don't share too much personal information too quickly. But rules can't protect you from someone who's playing a completely different game. I'd been on various dating apps for about 2 years, going on occasional dates that ranged from awkward to pleasant, but never quite right. Then I matched with Emma. Her profile was refreshingly normal. No filtered photos or inspirational quotes, just pictures of her hiking, reading in coffee shops, and laughing with friends. Her bio was witty without trying too hard, and she actually read mine, referencing an obscure band I'd mentioned in our first conversation. We messaged for 2 weeks before meeting, and the conversation never felt forced. She was educated, funny, and had this way of asking questions that made me want to open up. When we finally met for dinner, she was exactly like her photos, maybe even prettier. The chemistry was immediate and undeniable. The relationship progressed naturally. We saw each other twice a week, then more frequently. She met my friends after a month, charming everyone with her quick wit and genuine interest in their lives. After 3 months, we were exclusive. After 6 months, she had a drawer at my place and a spare key. Everything about Emma felt right except for one thing. Her past was oddly vague. She said she'd moved to the city for a fresh start after a bad relationship, which I respected. We all have history we'd rather leave behind. She didn't have social media, claiming it was too toxic for her mental health. Her family lived abroad, and she was estranged from most of them. These seemed like yellow flags maybe, but not red ones. 8 months into our relationship, I was considering asking her to move in when everything unraveled. It started with a LinkedIn notification. Someone named Bradley Chen had viewed my profile multiple times. I didn't recognize the name, but when I clicked on his profile, my blood went cold. His most recent post was about his missing fiancée, Emma Richardson, complete with photos. It was my Emma. Same face, same smile, but blonde instead of brunette. The post detailed how she disappeared 6 months ago, taking $30,000 from their joint account and his grandmother's jewelry. He was offering a reward for information about her whereabouts. I sat at my computer, staring at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. The woman I loved, who was currently asleep in my bed, was a fugitive. She'd been engaged to someone else when we met. She'd stolen money. She'd been lying about everything. I screenshotted everything and went to the bathroom to think. My phone was in there, and I used it to dig deeper. Bradley had posted extensively about Emma's disappearance. There were photos of them together spanning 3 years, vacations, family gatherings, a proposal on a beach at sunset. They'd been planning their wedding when she vanished. But the more I read, the more confusing it became. Bradley's posts about their relationship before she disappeared painted a different picture. Controlling behavior, isolation from friends, constant monitoring of her activities. Other people had commented on his posts, some supporting him, but others suggesting Emma might have had good reasons to leave. I didn't know what to believe, but I knew I needed answers. I went back to the bedroom, planning to wake Emma and confront her. But she was already awake, sitting up in bed, my laptop open in front of her. She'd been going through my browser history and seen what I'd discovered. "I can explain," she said, but her voice was different. Colder, more calculated than I'd ever heard it. "Then explain," I said, standing by the door, ready to run if necessary. She told me a story about escaping an abusive relationship, taking money that was rightfully hers, starting over with a new identity. She cried, showing me scars I'd never noticed before, hidden under her hair and clothing. She begged me to believe her, to not contact Bradley, to understand that she'd lied to protect herself and eventually me. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But something in her eyes, a calculating look I'd never seen before, made me doubt everything. I told her I needed time to think, that she should go home for the night. She argued, then pleaded, then threatened, saying I didn't understand what I was getting myself into if I contacted Bradley. After she left, I changed my locks and spent the night researching. I found more than just Bradley. There was a James from 2 years before Bradley, also claiming she'd stolen from him. A Marcus from the year before that with a similar story. Emma Richardson wasn't even her real name. Each man had known her by a different name, but the pattern was the same. Meet online, whirlwind romance, trust established, money stolen, disappearance. I contacted Bradley through LinkedIn. His response was immediate and desperate. We video called, and he told me his side of the story. Yes, he'd been controlling, but only after he'd caught her in numerous lies. The $30,000 had been his life savings for their house. The jewelry had been in his family for generations. He'd hired a private investigator who'd tracked her to my city, but then lost the trail. While we were talking, my apartment door rattled. Someone was trying to use a key. Emma's key shouldn't have worked since I'd changed the locks, but I heard the familiar click of the deadbolt turning. I told Bradley I had to go and called 911, hiding in my bedroom closet like a child afraid of monsters. I heard her moving through my apartment, heard drawers opening, papers rustling. She was looking for something. Then I heard her in my bedroom, and she said, loud enough for me to hear, "I know you're here, Tom. You don't understand what you've done. Bradley is dangerous. He's convinced you of his lies, hasn't he? Just like he convinced the others." The others? What others? My mind was spinning. Was she the predator or the victim? Was Bradley the real danger, or was this another manipulation? The police sirens in the distance made the decision for her. I heard her curse and run, the front door slamming behind her. The police found my apartment ransacked. She'd taken my laptop, important documents, and inexplicably, every photo I had of us together. But she'd left something behind, probably by accident. A phone had fallen behind my dresser, an old prepaid flip phone. It had text messages on it, conversations with multiple people using different names, discussing marks and takes, and moving to the next city. Emma, or whatever her real name was part of something bigger. A network of people who used dating apps to find victims, build trust, and then steal everything they could. The texts revealed they shared information about successful tactics, warned each other about suspicious victims, even traded cities to avoid detection. The investigation that followed revealed the terrifying scope of the operation. Dozens of victims across the country, millions of dollars stolen, identities destroyed. Some victims had been targeted by multiple members of the network, their information shared among the group. They called it romance fraud, but it was more like emotional terrorism. Emma was never caught. She vanished completely, probably with a new name, new look, new profile on a different dating app. Bradley and I stayed in touch for a while, bonding over our shared trauma, but it was too painful to maintain. We were reminders to each other of how thoroughly we'd been fooled. I haven't dated since. I can't look at dating profiles without wondering what's real and what's performance. Every match feels like a potential threat. The woman at the coffee shop who smiles at me might be genuine, or she might be shopping for her next mark. Trust, once broken that completely, doesn't rebuild easily. The digital age promised to make dating easier, to help us find perfect matches through algorithms and compatibility scores. But it also made it easier for predators to hunt, to craft perfect personas designed to exploit our specific vulnerabilities. Emma had studied my profile, learned exactly who to be to make me fall in love. She'd been my perfect match because she'd designed herself to be. The scariest part is knowing she's still out there, probably reading someone else's profile right now, crafting a new persona, preparing to break another heart and empty another bank account. Dating apps are hunting grounds, and we're all potential prey, sharing our interests, our hopes, our dreams, giving predators everything they need to become exactly what we're looking for. The travel blogger's nightmare. Traveling solo as a woman requires constant vigilance, but documenting those travels online adds another layer of vulnerability I never fully appreciated until it was too late. My name is Sophia, and I'd built a modest following sharing my budget backpacking adventures across Southeast Asia, Europe, and South America. My blog and social media accounts were my travel diary and income source. I partnered with hostels for free stays in exchange for reviews, got small sponsorships from travel gear companies, and sold preset filters I developed for travel photography. It wasn't much money, but it funded my lifestyle of perpetual movement and discovery. I was careful about safety, or so I thought. I never posted in real time, always waiting until I'd left a location to share photos. I avoided posting pictures of my accommodation's exteriors or identifying landmarks near where I was staying. I thought I was being smart, but I underestimated how much information I was revealing in aggregate. The problems started in Prague. I'd been there for a week, exploring the city's stunning architecture and hidden cafes, when I noticed the same face appearing in the background of my photos. A man, probably mid-30s, wearing different clothes but definitely the same person. He was in my shot of the Charles Bridge, my photo at the John Lennon Wall, even in the mirror's reflection in a vintage shop I'd visited. I convinced myself it was coincidence. Prague's tourist circuit isn't that big, and plenty of people follow similar routes. But then I saw him at my hostel's breakfast room. He wasn't staying there, I'd have recognized him, but he was sitting alone, nursing a coffee, watching me over his newspaper. When I got up to leave, he followed. Not obviously, maintaining distance, but definitely following. I ducked into a busy market, weaving between stalls, and lost him in the crowd. My heart was racing as I returned to the hostel via a circuitous route, constantly checking over my shoulder. That night, I reviewed my recent posts across all platforms. With growing horror, I realized how much information I'd inadvertently shared. The hostel's distinctive breakfast room was visible in a story I'd posted. A go tag on a coffee shop photo placed me within a 3-block radius. My blog post about finding hidden gems off the beaten path included enough details for someone familiar with Prague to trace my exact route. I had over 50,000 followers across my platforms. Most were wonderful people living vicariously through my adventures or planning their own trips. But it only takes one person with bad intentions to turn a dream into a nightmare. I decided to leave Prague immediately, booking a last-minute bus to Vienna. I didn't post about leaving, didn't share my plans with anyone online. But at the bus station, there he was again. The same man, now pulling a suitcase, boarding the same bus. Panic set in. I pretended to take a phone call and walked away from the bus, watching him from a distance. He boarded, found a seat, and kept checking his phone and looking around, presumably for me. I didn't get on that bus. Instead, I took a train to Budapest, telling no one, posting nothing. For 3 days, I maintained radio silence online. My followers started worrying, sending messages asking if I was okay. Sponsors emailed about missed posting schedules. But I needed to figure out what was happening before I could continue. I created a fake account and searched for mentions of my main handle. That's when I found it, a forum dedicated to travel girl watching. My stomach turned as I read through posts about various female travel bloggers, discussing our routes, accommodations, and appearances. There were photos of us taken without our knowledge, some clearly shot from hiding spots or with telephoto lenses. My section of the forum had dozens of contributors. They called themselves my travel companions, sharing information about my locations, speculating about my next moves based on previous patterns, even rating the accessibility of places I'd stayed. The man from Prague was probably one of them, but he wasn't the only one. They had mapped out my travel patterns with frightening accuracy. They knew I preferred hostels over hotels, that I usually stayed in places for 5 to 7 days, that I favored walking tours on my second day in a new city. They'd analyzed my photos for background details, identifying specific restaurants, shops, even park benches. One post made my blood run cold. It was a photo of me sleeping on a night train, taken through the gap in my cabin curtains. I remembered that journey from Poland to Czech Republic, feeling safe in my locked compartment. But someone had been there, watching, photographing. The caption read, "Sleeping Beauty on the Prague Express. Cabin 14B." I scrolled through pages of similar content about other travel bloggers. Some had clearly been followed across multiple countries. There were discussions about the best ways to accidentally meet us, scripted conversation starters based on our posted interests, even shared resources about visa requirements to follow us across borders. I contacted the authorities, but what could they do? The forum was hosted in a country with lax internet laws. The men hadn't technically committed crimes just by taking photos in public spaces. Following someone across European borders was creepy, but not necessarily illegal if no direct contact or threat was made. But then I made a mistake. In my panic and isolation, I reached out to another travel blogger I'd met briefly in Barcelona, asking if she'd experienced anything similar. Within hours, my location in Budapest was posted on the forum. She hadn't betrayed me intentionally, but someone had hacked her messages or was monitoring her communications. The next morning, they found me. Not just the man from Prague, but two others. They sat at different tables in the cafe where I was trying to work, pretending not to know each other, but all watching me. When I left, they all left. When I stopped, they stopped. It was coordinated harassment, designed to let me know they'd found me. I went straight to the police station, but the language barrier and the complexity of explaining online stalking made it nearly impossible to convey the threat. The officers seemed to think I was paranoid, suggesting I was imagining patterns that weren't there. Meanwhile, the men waited outside the station, patient as predators. That night, I made the hardest decision of my traveling life. I called my parents and asked them to buy me a flight home immediately. I packed my backpack in 10 minutes, snuck out of the hostel through a staff entrance, and took a taxi straight to the airport. I spent the night in the secured departure area, not sleeping, watching for familiar faces. The flight home felt like an escape from a war zone. But the war followed me online. The forum exploded with anger about my disappearance. They felt betrayed, like I'd broken some unspoken contract by refusing to continue providing content for their consumption. My social media accounts were flooded with messages, some concerned but others clearly from forum members demanding to know where I'd gone. I had to abandon my travel blogger identity completely. 5 years of building a brand, countless connections and friendships formed online, all had to be severed. I couldn't trust which followers were genuine and which were predators. The income I'd built, modest as it was, vanished overnight. But they weren't done with me. Using photos they'd taken and stolen from my accounts, they created fake profiles pretending to be me. These profiles posted intimate stories about fictional encounters with men in various cities, tagged locations where I'd never been, and solicited meetups with other travelers. They were trying to destroy my reputation and potentially put me in danger if anyone believed these profiles were real. It took months of legal action to get the fake profiles removed, and new ones kept appearing. The forum eventually got shut down, but it respawned on another server within days. The community of stalkers had become self-sustaining, sharing tactics and targets like trading cards. I found out later that I wasn't their first victim to quit traveling. Several other female travel bloggers had similarly vanished from the internet after experiencing escalating harassment. We were refugees from our own dreams, driven offline and out of the travel community by men who saw our adventures as entertainment they were entitled to consume. Now, I work a regular job in a regular office in my hometown. I still travel occasionally, but I don't document it. No photos, no blogs, no digital footprint of my adventures. The world is still beautiful, but I experience it in private now, unwilling to share my joy with an audience that might include predators. The promise of social media for travelers was connection and community, the ability to inspire and be inspired. But it also created a marketplace where our experiences became products and we became targets. The very visibility that enabled us to build communities also exposed us to those who saw us not as people, but as content to be consumed, characters in their fantasies, or worse, prey to be hunted across continents. The genealogy website horror. Finding out about your ancestry through DNA testing and genealogy websites seemed like harmless fun until I discovered that some family secrets should stay buried. My name is Marcus, and what started as a Christmas gift from my wife turned into a nightmare that made me question everything I thought I knew about identity and family. The DNA test kit had been sitting on our shelf for months before I finally got around to doing it. Spit in a tube, mail it off, wait for results. Simple. I was hoping to find out if the family legend about Native American ancestry was true, maybe connect with some distant cousins. What I found instead was a rabbit hole of deception that went deeper than I could have imagined. The initial results were interesting but not shocking. Mostly European ancestry, no Native American heritage despite great-grandma's stories. I had a few fourth and fifth cousins on the platform, people who shared great-great-grandparents with me. I reached out to a few, exchanged pleasantries and family trees. It was genealogy small talk, nothing more. Then I got a message from someone named Richard Townsend. He claimed to be my half-brother. According to the site, we shared 24% of our DNA, which is consistent with half-siblings. But I didn't have any half-siblings. My parents had been married for 40 years, had my sister and me, no other children. There had to be a mistake. Richard was persistent but polite. He explained that he'd been adopted, had recently found his birth mother, and was now trying to find his birth father. According to his DNA matches, my father was his father too. He was born 2 years before me, which would mean my dad had another child before marrying my mom. I confronted my father, expecting him to laugh it off as a mistake. Instead, his face went pale. He admitted to a relationship before my mother, a complicated situation, a child he'd never known about. He begged me not to tell my mother, said it would destroy her, destroy our family. But Richard wanted to meet. He'd grown up wondering about his birth family, and now that he'd found us, he wasn't going to just disappear. He had questions, medical history he needed, a desire to understand where he came from. I felt caught between protecting my family and acknowledging this stranger who shared my blood. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. Richard looked nothing like me or my father. He was tall where we were average, blonde where we were dark, built like an athlete where we were bookish. But there was something in his eyes, the exact shade of green that my father, my sister, and I all shared. The meeting was awkward but cordial. Richard showed me photos of his adoptive family, talked about his career as a physical therapist, his kids who would be my nephews. He didn't want money or drama, just connection and medical history. We exchanged numbers and agreed to stay in touch while I figured out how to handle the situation with my family. That night, I did more research on the genealogy site, diving deeper into our shared matches. That's when things started to get strange. Richard and I had several DNA matches in common beyond what we should have had. We matched with people who showed up as my second and third cousins, but were showing as his first and second cousins. The math didn't work unless Richard and I shared more than just a father. I messaged him about the discrepancy, and he agreed it was odd. We both did more research, reaching out to matches, building out family trees, trying to understand the impossible genetic connections we were seeing. Every answer led to more questions, more impossible relationships that couldn't exist according to everything we knew about our families. Then I found her. Sarah Chen, listed as my first cousin once removed, which would make her my parents' cousin. But she was only 5 years older than me. When I reached out to her, she was as confused as I was. According to her family tree, we shouldn't be related at all. Her family had no connection to mine going back generations. But her DNA told a different story. She was related to me, to Richard, and to dozens of other people on the site who shouldn't have any connection to each other. We formed a group, trying to solve the puzzle of our impossible relationships. There were 12 of us initially, all showing genetic connections that our family trees said were impossible. The breakthrough came when one member, Janet, remembered something. Her mother had struggled with fertility and had used a clinic in the 1980s. The same clinic, it turned out, that Richard's birth mother had gone to. The same clinic that several of our mothers had visited during their pregnancies. Dr. Alan Morrison had run a fertility clinic in our city from 1978 to 1995. He'd helped hundreds of couples conceive, been considered a miracle worker. He'd also, we were beginning to realize, been using his own sperm instead of the donors the parents had selected or the father samples they'd provided. The group grew as more people tested and found impossible connections. 20 people, then 50, then over 100. All of us were his children. Dr. Morrison had fathered potentially hundreds of children over his 17-year practice. We were a massive sibling group who'd grown up in the same city, gone to the same schools in some cases, even dated each other unknowingly. 2 members of our group discovered they'd been married for 3 years before divorcing, never knowing they were half-siblings. Another pair had dated in college. Several had children together, cousins who were also half-siblings. The genetic web was a nightmare of unintended incest and violated consent. Dr. Morrison was still alive, in his 80s, living in a retirement community on the coast. When confronted, he showed no remorse. He claimed he was helping families, giving them healthy children with good genes. He kept records, detailed records, of every procedure, every birth. He knew exactly how many children he'd fathered, 347. The legal battles were complex. What he'd done wasn't technically illegal at the time, though it was grossly unethical. The parents who'd used his services had consented to artificial insemination, just not with his sperm. Many of the parents were now deceased or elderly, finding out their children weren't biologically theirs after decades of believing otherwise. My own situation was particularly complicated. My parents hadn't used a fertility clinic, or so they claimed, but the DNA didn't lie. Either my mother had used the clinic without my father's knowledge, or there was another explanation I didn't want to consider. When I finally confronted my mother with the evidence, she broke down. She'd had an affair with Dr. Morrison, not because she was attracted to him, but because he'd convinced her it was the only way to conceive. My father had low sperm count, which they'd hidden from family and friends. Dr. Morrison had offered a private solution to their problem. My father wasn't my biological father. The man who'd raised me, loved me, taught me to ride a bike and helped with homework, shared no genetic material with me. Richard wasn't my half-brother through my father, but through Dr. Morrison. We were both part of his massive web of children. The revelation destroyed my family. My parents' marriage, already strained by the emergence of Richard, couldn't survive this truth. My sister, who was younger and conceived after my parents stopped going to Dr. Morrison, was my father's biological child, but not fully my sister. The family I'd known my entire life was built on a foundation of lies. The support group for Dr. Morrison's children became a lifeline. We were all struggling with identity crises, relationship fallout, and the horror of potentially having hundreds of half-siblings in our community. Some members discovered they'd married half-siblings and had to grapple with whether to stay together. Others found out their children were at higher risk for genetic diseases due to unintended consanguinity. Dating became a minefield. Anyone in our age range from our city could be a half-sibling. We created a private database where people could check potential partners against our DNA registry, but it only worked if both people knew they might be Dr. Morrison's children. The paranoia was overwhelming. Dr. Morrison died 2 years after the discovery, taking many secrets with him. His records, while extensive, were incomplete. Not everyone he'd fathered had taken DNA tests. There were likely dozens, maybe hundreds more of us out there, living their lives unaware of their true parentage. The genealogy website that had started this journey implemented new features to flag potential close relatives and warn about unexpected relationships. But the damage was done. Hundreds of families had been shattered by one man's God complex, and the technology that finally exposed his crimes decades later. I still struggle with my identity. Am I Marcus, son of the man who raised me? Or am I Marcus, biological son of a monster who violated hundreds of women and destroyed countless families? The DNA test that was supposed to tell me who I was instead showed me that identity is more complex and fragile than genetics could ever capture. The promise of genealogy websites was to connect us with our past, to understand where we came from. But sometimes the past is better left unexamined, and some connections are too horrifying to process. In seeking my ancestry, I lost my family and gained hundreds of unwanted siblings, all of us bound together by a violation that occurred before most of us were even born. The marketplace murders. Everyone uses online marketplaces these days. Whether it's for selling old furniture, finding rare collectibles, or just decluttering, these platforms have become an essential part of modern life. I'm David, and I learned that sometimes what's being sold isn't what's advertised, and the real transaction might cost you everything. I'd been buying and selling vintage electronics on various platforms for years. Old synthesizers, analog recording equipment, vintage computers, anything with that perfect combination of nostalgia and functionality. I had a good reputation, hundreds of 5-star reviews, and a network of regular buyers and sellers who trusted me. The message came through on a Sunday evening. Someone named Greg Harrison had a collection of vintage synthesizers he needed to sell quickly due to an unexpected move. The photos he sent were impressive. A Roland Jupiter 8, a Mini Moog Model D, an ARP 2600, all in pristine condition. The prices were fair, not suspiciously low but good enough to resell for a decent profit. We exchanged several messages over the next few days. Greg was knowledgeable about the equipment, answering technical questions with the kind of detail only a real enthusiast would know. He explained he'd inherited the collection from his uncle, but didn't have the space or interest to keep it. He needed them gone within the week. The collection was worth about $30,000 total, but Greg was willing to sell everything for $22,000 cash. He said he didn't want to deal with shipping such delicate equipment and preferred a local, in-person transaction. Since we were only about 2 hours apart, this seemed reasonable. I'd done dozens of high-value cash transactions before. I had my protocols: meet in public places, bring a friend, test equipment thoroughly, count money in front of security cameras. But Greg said the synthesizers were at a storage unit, and he couldn't transport them all. He suggested I come to the storage facility, test everything there, and then we could complete the transaction at the bank next door. The storage facility was in an industrial area on the outskirts of his city. Not ideal, but I'd been to similar places before. I brought my friend Mike, who knew enough about synthesizers to help me test everything quickly. We arrived at 2 p.m. on a Thursday, broad daylight, plenty of people around. Greg met us at the facility entrance. He was younger than his messages suggested, maybe mid-20s, wearing expensive clothes that seemed at odds with someone desperately selling inherited music equipment. But sellers come in all types, and I'd learned not to judge based on appearance. The storage unit was climate-controlled and professional, the kind musicians actually use for valuable equipment. Everything was set up and powered on when we arrived. The synthesizers were real, vintage, and in the condition advertised. Mike and I spent an hour testing every piece, checking serial numbers against vintage equipment databases, verifying authenticity. While we were testing, Greg mentioned he had other interested buyers coming later that day, adding subtle pressure to make a decision. It's a common sales tactic, one I'd used myself, so I didn't think much of it. The equipment was worth the asking price, and I had the cash in a locked bag in my car. That's when I noticed the security cameras in the storage unit were covered with tape. Greg explained the facility was upgrading their system, and the cameras were temporarily offline. A small red flag, but facilities do maintenance. The equipment was real. Greg seemed legitimate, and greed clouded my judgment. I told Greg I'd get the money from my car. Mike stayed with the equipment while I walked back to the parking lot. As I was retrieving the bag, I got a text from Mike. "Something's wrong. Come back quick." When I returned to the storage unit, Mike was gone. Greg was still there, calmly packing up one of the synthesizers. He said Mike had gotten an emergency call and had to leave. But Mike wouldn't have left without telling me directly, and his car was still in the parking lot. "Where's Mike?" I asked, my hand moving to my phone. "Mike's fine," Greg said, but his demeanor had changed. The friendly seller was gone, replaced by someone cold and calculating. "But he won't be if you don't cooperate." 2 more men entered the storage unit, blocking the exit. One was holding Mike's phone. The other had his hand in his jacket pocket in a way that suggested a weapon. They didn't say anything, just stood there while Greg continued talking. "Here's what's going to happen," Greg said calmly. "You're going to transfer the money electronically, not cash. Then you're going to help us load this equipment into our van. After that, you're going to forget this ever happened." "The synthesizers were just bait?" I asked, trying to understand. Greg laughed. "Oh, they're real. Stolen, but real. We've been using them for months, catching buyers like you. High-value cash transactions, isolated locations, predictable behavior. You vintage equipment guys are all the same. So worried about authenticity you forget about safety. They had my phone, my keys, and presumably Mike somewhere. I had no choice but to comply. I transferred the money to an account Greg provided, watched them load the synthesizers into a white van with no plates. They were professionals, wearing gloves, avoiding cameras, speaking minimally. Before leaving, Greg gave me a final warning. "Your friend is in Unit 47B. He'll be fine if you wait 30 minutes before getting him. Call the police before that, and he won't be. We know where you live, David. We know where you work. This is a one-time transaction. Don't make it complicated." They left me in the storage unit, taking my phone and keys, which they said I'd find in the parking lot. I waited exactly 30 minutes, each second feeling like an hour, before running to Unit 47B. The door was unlocked. Mike was inside, tied up but unharmed, more angry than scared. We called the police immediately, but the trail was already cold. The storage unit had been rented with a fake ID and paid for in cash. The bank account I'd transferred money to was already emptied and closed. The van was probably already abandoned or had its plates switched. The police investigation revealed we weren't the first victims. Similar robberies had occurred across 3 states, always targeting high-value hobbyist communities. Vintage guitars, rare coins, collectible cards, anything that attracted cash buyers to isolated transactions. The gang would steal the bait items, use them to lure buyers, then steal from the buyers and move on. But here's where it gets worse. 3 weeks after our robbery, I saw a news report about a vintage guitar collector found dead in a storage unit 2 states over. The circumstances were eerily similar to our experience, except the victim had apparently tried to fight back. The police wouldn't confirm a connection, but I knew it was the same group. I started researching, connecting with other victims online. We found at least 12 similar robberies over 18 months, with 2 deaths that might be connected. The group was escalating, becoming more violent with each score. They'd started with simple robberies, but were now leaving bodies behind. The vintage equipment community, once built on trust and shared passion, became paranoid. Long-standing marketplaces implemented new verification systems. Sellers started demanding escrow services. Buyers hired security for high-value transactions. The casual, friendly nature of collector-to-collector sales was destroyed. I couldn't stop thinking about how they'd researched me. They knew my buying patterns, my price points, what equipment would draw me in. They'd probably been watching my online activity for months, learning my habits, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Every transaction I'd publicly reviewed, every forum post about dream equipment, had been intelligence for them. 6 months later, I got an email from an encrypted account. It contained photos of me at my home, at work, with my family. The message was simple: "We're watching. Stay quiet." I'd already told the police everything, but the message was clear that they were still out there, still monitoring their previous victims. I stopped dealing in vintage equipment entirely, sold my collection, closed my accounts, removed myself from all online marketplaces. The $22,000 loss hurt, but the loss of security was worse. Every white van makes me nervous. Every storage facility feels like a trap. Every online transaction carries the weight of potential violence. The promise of online marketplaces was to democratize commerce, to let anyone buy and sell freely. But they also created hunting grounds for sophisticated criminals who use our interests against us, our passions as bait, our trust as weakness. The same platforms that connect collectors and enthusiasts also connect predators with prey. Mike still has nightmares about those hours in the storage unit. He won't go to any transaction with me anymore. Not that I do them. The vintage synthesizer community lost 2 members that day, and who knows how many more have quietly retreated after similar experiences. The gear Greg used to trap us is probably being used to trap someone else now, in another state, another storage facility. The cycle continues, and all we can do is warn others and hope they're more careful than we were. But when passion meets opportunity, when the deal seems too good to pass up, someone will take the bait. They always do. The meditation app manipulation. Mental health apps were supposed to be a safe space for healing and growth. I'm Lisa, and I discovered that even our most vulnerable moments of seeking help can be exploited by those who understand how to weaponize wellness. I'd been dealing with anxiety for years, but the pandemic made it unbearable. Therapy waitlists were months long, and I needed help immediately. That's when I found Mindful Space, a meditation and mental wellness app with thousands of positive reviews. It offered guided meditations, sleep stories, anxiety management techniques, and even one-on-one coaching with certified professionals. The app started with a detailed questionnaire about my mental health history, triggers, goals, and preferences. It felt thorough and professional, like they really wanted to understand my needs to provide personalized help. I mentioned my social anxiety, fear of abandonment, recent breakup, and struggles with self-worth. In hindsight, I handed them a blueprint of my vulnerabilities. The first few weeks were genuinely helpful. The guided meditations were soothing, the sleep stories helped my insomnia, and the daily check-ins made me feel supported. The app would send perfectly timed notifications when I was feeling anxious, almost like it knew my emotional state. I attributed this to smart algorithm design and didn't question it further. After a month, the app suggested I upgrade to premium for access to a personal wellness coach. The coach, Dr. Sarah, had impressive credentials and specialized in exactly my issues. Our first video session was free, and she was everything I needed. Warm, understanding, insightful. She made me feel seen and heard in ways I hadn't experienced in years. I signed up for weekly sessions at $200 each. Expensive but seemingly worth it for my mental health. Dr. Sarah knew exactly what to say, how to push me just enough outside my comfort zone, when to offer comfort versus challenge. She encouraged me to share everything, said that complete honesty was essential for healing. Over 3 months, I told Dr. Sarah everything. My deepest fears, traumatic experiences, family secrets, relationship patterns. She took detailed notes, saying she was creating a comprehensive treatment plan. She also encouraged me to use the app's journaling feature daily, assuring me it was completely private and encrypted. The manipulation started subtly. Dr. Sarah began suggesting that my anxiety was worse than I realized, that I needed more intensive treatment. She recommended doubling our sessions and adding the app's premium pharmaceutical partnership for anxiety medication. When I hesitated due to cost, she implied that not prioritizing my mental health was a form of self-harm. She started planting seeds of doubt about my support system. My friends didn't really understand me. My family was part of the problem. The only people who truly cared about my well-being were at Mindful Space. She suggested I join the app's community forums to connect with others on similar journeys. The forums were addictive. Everyone was so supportive, so understanding. They celebrated my progress, commiserated with my struggles, and always had time to chat. Looking back, the responses were too perfect, too immediate, too specifically tailored to what I needed to hear. But at the time, it felt like finding my tribe. Then came the retreat. Dr. Sarah and several forum members encouraged me to attend Mindful Space in-person wellness retreat. It was expensive, $5,000 for a week, but they assured me it would be transformative. Dr. Sarah said she'd be there personally to guide me through breakthrough sessions. Forum members shared stories of how the retreat had changed their lives. I emptied my savings to attend. The retreat was at a remote center in the mountains, beautiful but isolated. No cell service, which they said was intentional to help us disconnect from digital stressors. There were about 30 attendees, all with similar stories of finding salvation through the app. The first day was wonderful. Yoga at sunrise, healthy meals, group therapy sessions, nature walks. But the second day, things shifted. The sessions became more intense, more invasive. We were encouraged to share our most shameful secrets, to release our trauma through increasingly uncomfortable exercises. They started sleep deprivation tactics disguised as round-the-clock healing. We were woken for 3 a.m. meditation sessions, kept up late with intensive group work, fed just enough to function but not enough to think clearly. They said exhaustion would break down our barriers to healing. By day 4, several attendees were having breakdowns, which the facilitators called breakthroughs. People were sharing things they'd never told anyone, confessing to crimes, revealing affairs, admitting to thoughts they'd suppressed. Everything was being recorded for our treatment records. That's when I realized Dr. Sarah wasn't there. When I asked, they said she'd had an emergency but was watching our sessions remotely. I demanded to speak with her, and they showed me to a communication room. The video call connected, But something was off about Dr. Sarah. Her voice was slightly different, her mannerisms not quite right. I pretended everything was fine, but started planning my escape. That night, while everyone was in another exhausting group session, I snuck into the administration office. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Files on every attendee with detailed psychological profiles, financial information, and notes about exploitation potential. My file included everything I'd told Dr. Sarah, plus analysis of how to extract more money from me. There were recordings of our sessions, my journal entries, even ambient recordings from my phone when the app was running in the background. They knew everything about me, had been monitoring me constantly, building a profile of exactly how to manipulate me. I found evidence that Dr. Sarah was actually multiple people using the same identity, reading from scripts based on my psychological profile. The forum members who'd been so supportive were mostly employees, paid to create an echo chamber that reinforced whatever the app wanted me to believe. I took photos of everything with a digital camera I'd brought for the retreat, then snuck back to my room. The next morning, I faked a family emergency, insisting I had to leave immediately. They tried to convince me to stay, even offered to refund part of my fee, but I held firm. The contract I'd signed actually allowed me to leave with 24 hours' notice, though they didn't advertise that fact. The drive away from that place was the longest of my life, constantly checking my mirrors, expecting them to follow. When I finally got cell service, I had dozens of messages from Mindful Space, from Dr. Sarah, from forum friends, all expressing concern, urging me to return, warning that leaving treatment prematurely could cause psychological damage. I went straight to the FBI. Mindful Space wasn't just a predatory wellness app. It was an elaborate fraud scheme with potential cult-like elements. They were targeting vulnerable people, extracting their deepest secrets, then using that information for financial exploitation and potentially blackmail. The investigation revealed that Mindful Space had thousands of victims across the country. Some had spent their life savings on increasingly expensive treatments. Others had cut off family and friends at the app's suggestion. A few had disappeared entirely, possibly recruited into the organization itself. The real horror was in the details. They'd been using the recordings and journal entries to create detailed psychological profiles that were being sold to data brokers. Our most intimate thoughts and fears were being packaged and monetized. Some victims reported being blackmailed with their recorded confessions. Others found their revealed secrets being used in targeted advertising for other predatory services. Mindful Space was shut down, but the damage was done. Thousands of people's most vulnerable moments were now data points in some digital marketplace. The creators disappeared with millions in revenue, the money hidden in offshore accounts. Most victims were too ashamed to come forward, not wanting their secrets revealed further. We formed our own Discord server, collecting evidence, comparing stories. There were 12 of us who'd been targeted, ranging from 13 to 17 years old when it happened. Some had met him in person with worse outcomes than mine. One boy had been assaulted. Another had been blackmailed with embarrassing photos he'd been manipulated into sharing. We went to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center with our evidence. The investigation revealed that Reaper was actually Marcus Webb, a 41-year-old registered sex offender who wasn't supposed to be using online games at all. He'd been grooming minors through various games for over a decade, moving from game to game as he was discovered. The most disturbing discovery was that he kept detailed notes on every minor he encountered. Screenshots of conversations, photos they'd shared, real names and addresses he'd gathered through social engineering. He had files on hundreds of kids, rating them on vulnerability and likelihood of meeting in person. Marcus was arrested and eventually sentenced to 15 years in prison. But the damage to us was already done. I couldn't play online games anymore without wondering if friendly adults were actually predators. The escape that gaming had provided became a source of anxiety and fear. The game company issued a statement about improving their safety measures, but little actually changed. They added some automated filters for inappropriate messages, but predators just learned to speak in code. They required age verification, but it was easily bypassed. The fundamental problem remained that children and adults were sharing spaces with minimal supervision and maximum opportunity for manipulation. I learned that the features that make online gaming so appealing to kids, the anonymity, the escape from reality, the chance to be someone different, also make it perfect hunting grounds for predators. They can be anyone, claim anything, build trust over months or years, all while hiding behind an avatar and a username. My parents never fully understood what happened. To them, it was just online drama that proved I spent too much time gaming. They didn't grasp that Reaper had been as real and influential in my life as any in-person adult. The trauma of betrayal by someone I trusted was just as valid, even though we'd primarily existed to each other as pixels on a screen. Years later, I still game, but only with real-life friends. I see young players in public lobbies being approached by older players offering help, gear, guild invites, and I want to warn them. But how do you explain to a kid that the cool adult who's being nice to them might be a predator? How do you protect children in spaces that are designed to be separate from parental supervision? The promise of online gaming was connection and community across boundaries of age, geography, and circumstance. But those same features that break down barriers also eliminate the protections that exist in real-world interactions. In a game, anyone can be anyone, and by the time you discover who they really are, it might be too late. The influencer factory. My dream was simple: become a successful social media influencer, travel the world, and inspire others while making a living doing what I loved. My name is Ashley, and I learned that sometimes when dreams come true too quickly, they're actually nightmares in disguise. I'd been posting lifestyle content for 3 years with modest success. 5,000 followers, occasional brand partnerships, enough engagement to feel validated, but not enough to quit my day job. Then I received an email that seemed to change everything. Elevate Social Management had noticed my content and wanted to offer me representation. They specialized in growing micro-influencers into major social media personalities. Their website showcased dozens of success stories, influencers who'd gone from thousands to millions of followers under their guidance. The initial video call was impressive. 3 executives in a sleek office explained their comprehensive approach: professional photography, content strategy, brand partnerships, cross-platform promotion, even media training. They showed me detailed analytics of my current performance and projections of where they could take me. Within a year, they promised, I'd have at least 500,000 followers and be earning 6 figures. The contract seemed standard. They'd take 20% of earnings, handle all business negotiations, and provide resources for content creation. They even offered a $10,000 signing bonus as an advance against future earnings. For someone making $40,000 a year at a job I hated, it was a dream come true. The first month was everything they promised. Professional photographers appeared for shoots, my content quality skyrocketed, and my follower count started climbing rapidly. They had me posting on a strict schedule, engaging with specific accounts, using predetermined hashtags. It felt formulaic, but it was working. They flew me to Los Angeles for a week of intensive development. I stayed in a beautiful house with other influencers they managed, all of us creating content, collaborating, living the influencer dream. We were encouraged to post constantly, showing our glamorous new lifestyle, the success that partnership with Elevate had brought us. But certain things felt off. We weren't allowed to leave the house without supervision. supposedly for our safety and to maximize productivity. Our phones were collected at night to ensure proper rest. We were given specific scripts for our posts, exact captions that had been optimized for engagement. I noticed that all of us were posting similar content, just with slight variations. The same locations, the same products, the same general message about transformation and success. When I questioned this, they said it was part of building a brand family that could cross-promote effectively. I still struggle with trust, especially regarding mental health services. Every therapist feels like a potential predator, every wellness app a possible trap. The very act of seeking help feels dangerous because it requires vulnerability, and I've learned that vulnerability can be weaponized. The internet promised to democratize mental health support, to make help accessible to everyone. But it also created new ways to exploit those seeking help, to turn our pain into profit, our trauma into data points. Mindful Space understood that people at their lowest points are the easiest to manipulate, and they built an entire business model around that exploitation. Story 9. The Gaming Guild Groomer. Online gaming was my escape from reality, a place where I could be heroic and powerful instead of just another awkward teenager. My name is Tyler, and I was 16 when I learned that predators don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like mentors. I'd been playing Eternal Realms Online for 2 years, slowly improving from a novice to a moderately skilled player. The game was my life outside of school. I spent every free hour grinding levels, completing quests, and dreaming of joining one of the elite guilds that dominated the server rankings. When Sovereign Order, the third-ranked guild on our server, recruited me, I couldn't believe it. They were legendary players with the best gear, exclusive access to endgame content, and a reputation for turning good players into great ones. The guild leader, known as Reaper, personally messaged me after watching me perform in a public raid. Reaper was everything I wanted to be in the game. Max level, rare achievements, respected by everyone. He was also genuinely helpful, spending hours teaching me advanced strategies, giving me expensive gear, and including me in high-level raids I had no business being in yet. He became my mentor, my friend, my role model. The guild had about 50 active members, but there was an inner circle of about 10 players who got special attention from Reaper. I was thrilled to be included in this group. We had our own Discord channel, separate from the main guild, where we'd voice chat during raids and hang out even when not playing. Reaper was in his 30s, he said, working in IT, playing games to relax after stressful days. He was funny, charismatic, and had a way of making each of us feel special. He'd remember details about our lives, ask about our problems, offer advice about everything from game strategies to real-life issues. Over several months, Reaper became more than just a guild leader to me. He was the older brother I never had, the cool adult who actually understood gaming and didn't judge me for spending so much time online. When my parents fought, I'd message Reaper. When I struggled at school, he'd listen and offer support. He started giving me special privileges in the guild, making me a raid leader despite my age and relative inexperience. Other guild members had to respect me because Reaper said so. It was intoxicating for a 16-year-old who felt powerless in real life. The boundary crossing started slowly. Reaper would make comments about how mature I was for my age, how I wasn't like other teenagers. He'd share inappropriate jokes in our private messages, testing how I'd react. When I laughed along, not wanting to seem uncool, he escalated. He started asking about my personal life in detail. Did I have a girlfriend? Had I been with anyone? What did I find attractive? He framed it as friendly advice giving, an older friend helping me navigate adolescence. He shared his own stories, increasingly sexual in nature, normalizing conversations that I now recognize as grooming. 6 months after joining the guild, Reaper suggested we meet at a gaming convention in a city 2 hours from where I lived. Several guild members would be there, he said, and it would be great to finally game together in person. He offered to pay for my ticket, hotel room, even transportation. My parents, not understanding online relationships, were hesitant but eventually agreed when I explained it was a group event. But when I arrived at the convention, it was just Reaper. The other guild members had cancelled last minute, he said, but we could still have fun. He'd booked us a hotel room to share to save money, though he'd previously offered to pay for everything. Red flags were everywhere, but I was 16 and trusted him completely. That weekend was when I realized something was very wrong. Reaper was different in person, more physical, more insistent. He kept trying to get me to drink alcohol, got angry when I refused, and made comments about my appearance that made me uncomfortable. When I said I wanted my own room, he accused me of not trusting him after everything he'd done for me. I spent most of the convention avoiding him, hanging out with other teenagers I met there instead. He texted me constantly, oscillating between anger and apologies, threatening to kick me from the guild, then promising rare items if I came back to the room. I finally told him I was sick and took a bus home early, not telling him I was leaving. When I got home and logged into the game, I'd been kicked from the guild. Reaper had told everyone I'd stolen from the guild bank and tried to sabotage a raid. My reputation on the server was destroyed. Players I'd considered friends blocked me without asking for my side of the story. Months of progress, relationships, and achievements were gone instantly. But then I started getting messages from former guild members. Other teenagers who'd been in Reaper's inner circle reached out privately, sharing similar stories. He'd groomed multiple minors over years, always following the same pattern. Build trust, isolate from others, escalate to inappropriate conversations, attempt to meet in person. One girl, Sarah, had actually reported him to the game company years ago, but nothing had happened. He'd simply moved to a new server, started a new guild, found new victims. The game company cared more about keeping paying subscribers than protecting children. By month 2, the demands intensified. They wanted access to all my social media accounts to optimize posting times. They needed my banking information to streamline payment processing. They required me to sign additional contracts for exclusivity, preventing me from working with any brands not approved by them. The follower growth was undeniable. I'd hit 100,000 followers across platforms, but the engagement felt wrong. Comments were generic, repetitive. The followers' profiles looked real at first glance, but felt hollow upon inspection. When I tried to interact genuinely with my audience, my posts would be edited or deleted by the management team. I discovered they were buying followers, using bot networks to inflate numbers. The brand deals they secured were with companies they owned or had stakes in. We were promoting products that didn't exist yet, services that were fronts for data harvesting, cryptocurrency schemes disguised as investment opportunities. When I tried to leave after 3 months, they reminded me of the contract. The $10,000 bonus had to be repaid if I left within the first year, plus penalties and projected lost earnings. They owned all content created during our partnership. They had passwords to all my accounts. They even claimed ownership of my influencer name, which I'd been using long before meeting them. I consulted a lawyer who revealed the horrifying scope of what I'd signed. The contract essentially gave them complete control over my online identity for 5 years. The house in Los Angeles where I'd stayed, they'd filmed everything, creating a library of content they could post as me indefinitely. The other influencers I'd met, most were trying to escape the same trap. But the worst revelation came when I dug deeper into Elevate social management. It was a front for a massive fraud operation. They weren't just buying followers and faking engagement. They were using our accounts to run scams, promote fraudulent investments, and harvest data from our real followers. My account, with its manufactured 150,000 followers, was being used to promote a fake charity that was actually a money laundering operation. Other influencers in their network were unknowingly promoting pyramid schemes, fake health products, even human trafficking recruitment disguised as modeling opportunities. When I threatened to go public, things got darker. They had those videos from the house, edited to look compromising. They had my social security number, my family's information, access to my entire digital life. They showed me what they could do, posting a fake confession on my account about lying to my followers, destroying my credibility in minutes before deleting it. I felt completely trapped. They were posting as me daily, maintaining the illusion that I was living my best influencer life while I was actually hiding in my apartment, afraid to be seen in public in case someone recognized me from the false content being posted. My real friends thought I'd become shallow and materialistic based on my posts. My family was confused by my sudden lifestyle change that only existed online. The FBI got involved when one of the fake charities was exposed. The investigation revealed that Elevate was run by an international crime syndicate using social media influencers as fronts for various illegal activities. We were the faces of their operations, providing legitimacy and reach they couldn't achieve otherwise. Over 200 influencers were trapped in similar contracts across multiple management companies that were all part of the same network. Combined, we represented millions of followers, billions of views, and unknowing participation in crimes we never imagined. Young people desperate for social media success had been turned into digital puppets for organized crime. The takedown was massive, making international news. But the damage to us was irreversible. Our online identities were forever tainted. Real followers felt betrayed. Brands wouldn't work with us. The platform algorithms, trained on our artificial engagement, no longer promoted our genuine content. I had to abandon my influencer dreams entirely. My accounts, even after regaining control, were shadow banned on most platforms. The association with fraud made me unemployable in social media marketing. The $10,000 bonus I'd spent had to be returned as proceeds of crime. 5 years of building an online presence was destroyed in 3 months of fake success. The other victims and I formed a support group, sharing resources for rebuilding our lives offline. Some changed their names, moved cities, started over completely. Others fought legal battles trying to reclaim their digital identities. A few disappeared entirely, unable to handle the shame and exposure. The promise of influencer culture is that anyone can become famous, that authenticity and hard work will be rewarded with followers and fortune. But the systems designed to identify and elevate talent can also identify and exploit vulnerability. The same algorithms that can make you famous can be manipulated to make you a tool for someone else's agenda. I work in a library now, as far from social media as possible. Sometimes teenagers come in talking about their follower counts, their dreams of influence, and I want to shake them. But I know they won't listen, just like I didn't listen to warnings about things being too good to be true. The internet created the influencer economy, democratizing fame and fortune. But it also created new ways to exploit those who seek that fame, turning their dreams into weapons against themselves and their audiences. The influencer factory doesn't create stars, it creates victims, and by the time you realize you're not the product being sold but the tool being used, it's already too late. Epilogue: The Digital Darkness. These 10 stories represent just a fraction of the horrors lurking in our interconnected world. Each protagonist thought they were engaging with technology safely, using platforms and services as intended. But beneath the surface of our digital lives exists an ecosystem of predation that evolves as quickly as the technology itself. The common thread through all these experiences isn't just the violation of trust or the exploitation of vulnerability. It's the fundamental asymmetry of information and power in digital spaces. The perpetrators in these stories understood the systems better than their victims, saw the possibilities for exploitation where others saw only connection and opportunity. We live in an age where our most intimate moments are digitized, where our thoughts become data, where our connections are mediated by algorithms we don't understand. Every app we download, every profile we create, every photo we share adds to a digital footprint that can be tracked, analyzed, and weaponized by those who know how to read the signs. The victims in these stories aren't uniquely naive or careless. They're ordinary people navigating a digital landscape that's designed to encourage sharing, trust, and engagement without fully revealing the risks. They followed the rules they knew, took the precautions they understood, and still found themselves trapped in nightmares they couldn't have imagined. What makes these digital horrors particularly insidious is their persistence. Unlike physical threats that exist in specific times and places, digital threats are omnipresent and permanent. The stolen photos, leaked information, and false profiles created in these stories continue to exist somewhere in the vast ocean of the internet, waiting to resurface and re-victimize their targets. The platforms and services that enabled these horrors often escape accountability. They're designed to maximize engagement and profit, with safety features added reluctantly and minimally. The same features that make these platforms valuable, connectivity, anonymity, virality, also make them dangerous. And when things go wrong, the platforms claim they're just neutral facilitators, not responsible for how their tools are misused. Law enforcement struggles to keep pace with digital predation. Crimes that cross state and national boundaries, that exist in the gray areas of terms of service violations and technical legality, that require understanding of complex technologies and online cultures, often go uninvestigated or unprosecuted. By the time authorities understand one threat, criminals have moved on to new platforms and methods. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of these stories is how they've become normalized. Every person who uses social media has a story of inappropriate messages, suspicious followers, or violated privacy. We've accepted a level of digital danger that would be intolerable in physical spaces. We teach children to be careful online the same way we once taught them to look both ways crossing the street, as if predation is just another hazard of modern life. The survivors of these digital horrors often find that there's no returning to their previous lives. Trust, once broken in such fundamental ways, doesn't fully rebuild. The internet, once a source of opportunity and connection, becomes a minefield of potential threats. Many retreat from digital life entirely, becoming refugees from the connected world. Yet complete disconnection isn't realistic for most people. Our jobs, relationships, and daily functions increasingly require digital participation. We can't opt out of the internet any more than we can opt out of society itself. So we continue forward, more cautious perhaps, more aware of the dangers, but still vulnerable to new forms of exploitation we haven't yet imagined. These stories serve as warnings, but they're also testimonies to resilience. Each survivor found the strength to escape, to rebuild, to warn others. They formed communities with fellow victims, created resources for prevention, pushed for better protections. From their trauma came wisdom that might protect others from similar fates. The dark side of our digital age isn't going away. As technology advances, as virtual and augmented reality become mainstream, as artificial intelligence becomes more sophisticated, new opportunities for exploitation will emerge. The predators will adapt, finding new ways to use our own tools against us. But awareness is the first defense. Understanding that our digital lives have real consequences, that online connections carry real risks, that the person on the other side of the screen might not be who they claim to be. These aren't reasons to disconnect entirely, but to engage more thoughtfully, more carefully, with full knowledge of what we're risking. The promise of the internet was to bring humanity together, to democratize information and opportunity, to create a better world through connection. That promise remains, but it coexists with dangers our predecessors couldn't have imagined. We're the first generation to navigate this digital frontier, making mistakes and learning lessons that will hopefully protect those who come after us. In the end, these aren't just stories about technology gone wrong. They're stories about human nature, about how our fundamental needs for connection, success, love, and understanding can be exploited by those who see vulnerability as opportunity. The medium is digital, but the crimes are ancient. Deception, theft, violation, predation. As we move deeper into the digital age, as the line between online and offline continues to blur, these stories become not cautionary tales, but survival guides. They teach us to question perfect profiles, to doubt too good to be true opportunities, to protect our vulnerabilities even as we seek connection. They remind us that behind every screen is a human being, and not all of them have good intentions. The darkness in our digital world is real, pervasive, and evolving, but so is our ability to recognize it, resist it, and protect ourselves and others from it. These 10 stories represent 10 lessons learned the hard way, 10 warnings for those who come next, 10 reasons to engage with our connected world with both hope and caution. We cannot uninvent the internet or disconnect from digital life, but we can navigate it with our eyes open, aware of both its promises and its perils. In sharing these stories, in acknowledging the darkness that exists alongside the light, we take the first step toward a safer, more honest relationship with our digital world. The victims in these stories lost money, safety, identity, and innocence. But they gained something too. The knowledge that survival is possible, that recovery can happen, that their stories might prevent others from suffering similar fates. In their trauma lies a gift to the rest of us, a map of dangers to avoid, a guide through the digital darkness. As technology continues to evolve, new stories will emerge, new warnings will be needed, new protections will be developed. But the fundamental lesson remains. In our digital age, connection comes with risk, opportunity comes with danger, and every click, swipe, and share is a choice that could change our lives in ways we never imagined. These are the horror stories of our time, not of ghosts and monsters, but of predators who use our own tools against us, who turn our desires for connection and success into weapons of exploitation. They remind us that the most dangerous threats aren't viruses or hackers, but human beings who understand how to manipulate both technology and psychology for their own dark purposes. The digital age is here to stay, and so are its dangers. But forewarned is forearmed, and in sharing these stories, in learning from these experiences, we become better equipped to navigate the beautiful, terrible, promising, dangerous world we've created. The darkness is real, but so is our ability to shine light into it. One story, one warning, one survivor at a time.